and welcome back to a new video. My name is Rachel, and this little cutie here who is licking my headphones, like a strange girl, this is Kyra, and she says hi, kind of. So one of the things I've been seeing around on the internet a lot recently and that I want to talk about today is Evie magazine. Now, Evie is a conservative women's magazine from America, which was founded by, and I quote, husband and wife Gabriel Hugo Boom and Brittany Martinez in 2019, and they cover everything from seemingly harmless fashion advice and beauty tips to more serious and harmful content about why everyone should be an anti-vaxxer. They spread medical misinformation, they spread a lot of anti-feminist messages, and there is a hell of a lot of pro-Trump and pro-Elon Musk articles recently. I feel like I should make a quick disclaimer before I start, in regards to today's topic, it's kind of in the middle of the serious spectrum. There's a lot of things about this magazine that I'm critical of, but there's also a few things that I think are actually quite good. And I'm going to be critical of the bits I'm critical of, and not critical about the bits that I'm not critical of. Just because I'm talking about something, that doesn't mean that I think it's the worst thing in the world and that it should be banned. It just means I kind of wanted to talk about it. A few people have been mad recently because I've been trying to make lighter, less serious videos, and they're like, how dare you try and get this thing banned? You're basically a dictator. And I'm like, it's not that deep. I just want to talk about something interesting. I'm not trying to get it banned. So I feel like I should make that clear before I start. I'm not overly angry at this publication. There's some things I'm critical of about it, but I'm not trying to like get it banned and say that the people writing are the worst people in the world. I just want to talk about it. That's all. So according to an article in Rolling Stone, Evie has a readership of around 10 million people, which is not small at all, especially when it's been accused of spreading just outright misinformation, in particular medical misinformation. The Rolling Stone article says that Evie has published outright conspiracy theories, including stories about how the government lied about COVID-19 to continue lockdowns, or about how Democrats stole the 2020 election. Both of these stories were quickly deleted and then republished after Rolling Stone asked Martinez about them, with the latter story reworked to include the word opinion in the headline. Martinez denied removing the stories for editorial reasons, stating that the editorial team temporarily unpublished several hundred articles from 2019 to 2021 due to technical changes with our site, CMS, and photo requirements. Apparently. Founder Brittany Martinez says of the magazine that her desire to launch Evie stemmed from her frustration with contemporary women's magazines, saying the mission was to empower, educate, and entertain young women with content that celebrates femininity, encourages virtue, and offers a more honest perspective than they get elsewhere. She's classier than Cosmo, sexier than Refinery 29, and smarter than Bustle. Being smarter than anything? No. When you've read some of these articles, they cannot be called smart. As for classy, classiness is subjective. However, I would say calling this classier than Cosmo is a stretch, because Evie posts far more explicit stuff than I've ever seen in Cosmopolitan magazine. And sure, Cosmo is known for its outrageous and often silly sex tips, but it's always quite tongue-in-cheek with Cosmo, and it's always like meant a bit silly, whereas they're never as graphic as they are in Evie. The Evie articles featuring sex advice are written like full-on, incredibly explicit erotica for conservative women. Have a look at some of these examples, which I'm going to have to heavily censor due to YouTube being YouTube as I read out loud. We had sex in a car with strangers zooming by, and it was the most thrilling quickie of my life. I've been there, cramped back seats, fogged up windows, and accidentally honking the horn, so buckle up. We're going for a ride. And you know, objectively, like, this kind of content is not so bad. It's written for adults, it's pretty sex positive, there is a focus on safe sex, it offers practical tips. All of that is fantastic, but I also think it's extremely hypocritical for this publication. The entire opening section of this article is written like erotica that's meant to excite the reader. But if they're just wanting to educate, then it didn't need to be so graphic and smutty. There's nothing wrong with being graphic and smutty, as long as you're not being hypocritical about it, but they are later on. Sorry, Kyra's snoring next to me. She's had a bad hip day, so I'm not gonna move her. She's comfy, aren't you, baby? Yeah. Aww. Poor baby's in a little bit of pain, so I'm just gonna let her relax how she wants to. Again, sorry, but just to clarify again, there's nothing wrong with this content. It's just a little hypocritical in the context of being a conservative magazine, which in some cases has literally looked down on erotica. And this definitely to me does not say classier than Cosmo. So blah blah blah, they're on their honeymoon in Hawaii. Okay. Since our destination was a famous lagoon, I was in a tiny string bikini with a sarong covering my bottoms. Hubby was shirtless, aviators on, and the humidity had his skin glistening. I was on edge the whole drive because he teased me at the start, telling me he was gonna F me somewhere along the way, but I didn't know when. Suddenly he hit the hazard lights and pulled over. My heart instantly raced. I knew exactly what was coming. By the time the Jeep came to the stop, I was already wet. Cars passed by for a few seconds, and even though we had a hard top, the rolled up windows were untinted, leaving us just exposed enough. I untied my sarong as he climbed over to my side, tugging the strings on my hips until my bikini bottoms came undone. As I frantically pulled his trunks down and gave him a few quick strokes, he'd already slipped the bikini triangles off my neck. Do you see what I mean about it being so graphic? And it goes on. It gets more graphic. I spread my legs as wide as I could in the cramped space, pressing my bare foot hard against the dashboard. My hands were slipping on his sweaty back. Blah 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 blah. I lasted about 30 seconds before his strong thrust sent me into overdrive. Now, the rest of the article, again, isn't so bad, and it is actually educational. It talks about practical tips like using plenty of lube, what to wear for easy access, what positions to try in the car. Although, again, the positions bit, maybe not so educational because it's written more like a smutty erotica novel than an educational resource. But again, it's not that bad. The other bit of hypocrisy, though, and the bit that is kind of concerning, comes at the end of this article in regards to where to have car sex. They suggest places like the car wash, in a drive-in cinema. Here, they're like on the side of the road with other cars driving past. Like, you know, all very public places where you're quite likely to find children where they could easily see. It feels hypocritical for me for a conservative outlet who actively complain about gay people existing corrupting children, and yet are absolutely fine with encouraging heterosexual couples to have literal sex in public places and be naked in public places where children are likely to be because they want, and I quote, "the thrill of having people nearby adds to the excitement." That's the stuff I have the problem with. In another article, they're absolutely fine with using a photo of a topless woman and giving incredibly detailed instructions on how to give a... Not sure if that can be said on YouTube, so that may have been censored, but hands on his bits. Again, I have no problems with this in theory, it just feels somewhat hypocritical. Again, the article is very, very detailed, although it kind of weirdly starts off as if it was written by a teenager. Again, prepare for this to be heavily censored. Your touch will become his addiction, an obsession that only you can satisfy, a burning hunger that will leave him craving more of you every single time. Once a month, I devote 2 hours to adoring my husband's penis with a deeply sensual lingam massage that transforms him into a stallion. By the time we're done, he's radiating a controlled power for the next several days that feels almost superhuman, whether he's at work, playing sports, or inside of me. But it's not just him who's getting all the pleasure. It's no secret that I'm obsessed with my husband's penis. When we first met, my friend told me she could tell by the way he walked, he was packing something special. The first time I saw it, I covered my mouth and giggled in disbelief. It was a bit intimidating at first, but eventually with enough practice, it finally fits me like it's molded for me. I always knew I needed a husband who could match my passion and bring some world-class hardware to the table, and oh, did God bless me. When I stumbled upon the concept of penis worship in Hinduism, I couldn't help but joke with him that I'd finally found my religion. Interesting from a Christian conservative magazine, but here we are. So if your husband is well endowed, you're in luck. Lingam massages are even more enjoyable for both of you when you have plenty of space to use your hands. And then it just goes on like this a lot. It goes on and on and on and gets very detailed. I'll pop them on screen now. If you want to pause and read any of this, you can do. And again, it's not necessarily a bad thing. I'm just saying being this explicit in this way, in this context, is a choice. Hey all, editing me, just jumping in here, because I realised that I didn't really give any like kind of counter examples, and I just want to kind of like drive this point home a little bit more on their hypocrisy. So With just a very quick search, Evie have a lot of articles about why erotica is bad, including this one called "Is Reading Erotica Bad for Your Love Life?" This article argues that while erotica may appear like a safe way for individuals to explore their sexuality solo, it's slowly emerging that smut is not only addictive, but can also damage our romantic relationships. This article is a little bit of a mixed bag because it does make some points that I agree with. It talks about the romanticization of abuse in a lot of erotica books, which is something that I am heavily critical of, and I don't think that's healthy. However, it then just kind of piles all erotica and romance together and says that, therefore, all of it is wrong. All of it is bad. It says things like, it's slowly becoming apparent that reading erotica could be as addictive as watching pornography, and although no one is physically hurt in the production of erotic literature, the content can emotionally harm the reader and the people closest to them, just like pornography. This is the bit that I do agree with, the bit that says, it's perfectly rational for women to desire a loyal mate, but the erotic novels do take this a step further by making obsessive, controlling men appear desirable. One of the problems with romanticizing these kinds of men is that in the novels, these men are loyal to the heroine. However, in real life, they are controlling, dangerous, and very rarely loyal to their partners. These novels romanticize men with unhealthy obsessions and desensitize women to real-life violent crimes these men commit against their partners. Instead of seeing these men for the danger they are, young, naive women can mistake their obsessive behaviour for loyalty and commitment. This bit I do agree with, and I do think it's an issue with some types of erotica and romance book, but not all. We can't kind of tar it all with the same brush. They go on to say, though, that, like, it's not just this that's the problem, it's all erotica because, well, sex was once treated as an act with inherent value, but now it's been degraded to a transaction between participants. Every depiction of the act, from written and spoken word to live-action films, has been exploited by book publishers and pornographic creators. The more sex is gorged on in these degrading forms, the more these perversions leak into society. This is shown not only through the numerous reports of women who have had men strangle them without consent during sexual encounters, but also in anecdotal stories like the one, well, we didn't talk about that, but yeah. So again, I kind of half agree with the view that, like, we shouldn't be romanticizing abuse. A lot of people are angry with me for that, a lot of people disagree with me for that, but I stand by it and I'm not changing my mind. However, to just say that, like, all depictions of sex are bad and lead to this slippery slope, I think is narrow-minded. I don't like erotica, I don't enjoy it, I don't read it for fun. I have obviously reviewed a few bits for, like, bad bits of erotica for videos, but it's not something that appeals to me. But I'm not going to sit here and crap all over it and be like, and therefore it's terrible and no one should ever read it, because I do think there's a purpose for it. Like, I'm not going to sit here and pretend it's like high literature and it's like, ooh, the best thing ever written. But, like, if people just want to get off to something, then, you know, let them, right? I don't know. Don't really see the harm it does if it's not romanticizing abuse. Oh god, I just broke my keyboard. Hang on. Okay, all fixed. Another article they have is called, Is Reading Smut as Bad as Watching Porn? Our society has recently come to a few conclusions about pornography. Not that its production and dissemination is reprehensible and that it harms men and women in their views about sexuality. No, our society has looked at the deleterious effect, interesting choice of word, effects pornography has wrought on our culture and advocated for more, not less pornography, but produced, quote unquote, ethically. Pornography in any context cheapens intimacy and makes our relation to it and our perspective on it perverse and disjointed. We know that pornography gives individuals an unhealthy sense of what true intimacy looks like. Isn't it possible that erotic fiction could have the same effect? And this article then goes on to talk about why they believe erotica is just pornography in another form, and yeah, I kind of agree with that. That's fine. Just like the kind of it being the same sort of thing. Yeah, I can't disagree with that. I just find it so interesting that they're like, see, it cheapens intimacy, yet they're okay with these wives writing so graphically about their own sex lives in a way that is meant to excite the reader sexually, and these women are writing erotica, but I guess in this context it's okay because mental gymnastics, right? They argue that descriptive, well-written sex, even on the page, isn't as satisfying to read as it is to actually have in real life with someone we love. We might even start to believe that anything fiction can conjure up is better than the real thing, especially if our real-world love life is less than stellar. But that's what pornography does. It shapeshifts intimacy into something momentarily passionate and leads us to believe it's as good, if not better, than the real thing. In the process, it makes us entirely dependent on what it sells, and we become isolated or even immune to the kinds of intimacy the real world has to offer. And if you're arguing this about like entire erotica novels written, then how can you justify it being done on the same website you're writing for? It just, again, I'm not saying I agree with them on their conclusions here, but I am saying it's hypocritical for them to be doing the thing that they are so against. You know, it's just, it's a choice. Now, with these articles, you might be fooled into thinking this is a very sex-positive magazine, but no. They don't want cis hetero-married women to feel shame, but everyone else can, yeah? They deserve the shame. Here's an article titled, "People Who Like Kinky Sex Are Just Bad in Bed." And look, they're happy using another photo of a half-naked woman here. So I guess porn is okay in some context. Not that this is... You know what I mean. I'm using a conservative narrative. Anyway, on the surface, I don't actually mind the premise of this article. A big part of it is saying that people shouldn't be ashamed if they only like vanilla sex, if you want to use those terms. And that is absolutely true. However, to them jump to, so if you like anything else then you must feel ashamed and it means you're bad in bed, is just wild and incorrect and really rude. It says things like, many self-described kinksters have dubbed women who have a preference for vanilla sex as starfish, which refers to a woman who lays on her back in the missionary position, refusing to be more adventurous in bed. And if you're a woman who's not at the bare minimum an anal sex aficionado, you're a prude. You'll never be able to satisfy a man in any real sense, and he'll run off to the nearest kinky girl who will gladly give him the voracious, pornographic, anal sex he so deeply craves. But could it be that these self-described overzealous kinksters are just really terrible in bed? That is such a leap. An unnecessary leap. Vanilla sex may seem boring to many people, and they've taken up kink flexing, sorry that word, as a pastime and sounding board in broadcasting their kinks across the internet. It's nouveau status signaling to be extreme and offensive in bed. In truth, sex is a lot like money. People who have lots of sex tend to keep quiet about such things. People who are sexually satisfied tend to do the deed and go on about their business, whereas people who aren't seem to be on a mission to make kinks a central part of their identity. Ignoring the kink bit, I do think there's some truth in that. I feel like the people who talk about their personal sex life a lot and kind of brag about it maybe aren't as satisfied as they want the world to think. I think it's maybe like a little bit of, I guess you could call it projection, I'm not sure. In truth, there's a tremendous amount of satisfaction to be had in a sexually fulfilling relationship with someone you're deeply attracted to, where vanilla sex is more than sufficient to both parties involved. Absolutely, love that. That bit's fine. No problem with that. Vanilla sex can be defined as lovemaking, where two people lose themselves in the chemistry, the passion, the living, breathing essence of another person, and of course the act of lovemaking itself. If a man doesn't enjoy making passionate love to you and vice versa, and he has to choke you and humiliate you to reach orgasm, that doesn't make you unsexy, but it does make him an unskilled and terrible lover. That's the great thing about vanilla sex. You don't need a hyperstimulus like choking and anal when you can drive a man crazy with just your scent and your kisses and caress. Nothing compares to reaching heights of passion in sex, where a person's soulful connection is all that is needed and required. And kinks are a very poor substitute for real attraction and chemistry and true human connection. So, this whole article here, I think, is a really big missed opportunity. They could have had a great chance here to discuss why it's important to find someone you're sexually compatible with, but the author just missed that chance entirely and instead just chose to shame anyone who's into anything different to what they are. It's also a thorough misunderstanding of kink and BDSM and a lot of other types of sex. To say that anyone who's into BDSM is an unskilled and terrible lover is just incorrect. And to claim that any kind of BDSM or involvement with kink at all automatically means it's not passionate lovemaking is also incorrect. The line that kinks are a very poor substitution for real attraction and chemistry is probably what shows the biggest misunderstanding. Because, like, if it's not for you, that's absolutely fine, there's nothing wrong with that. But some people do find attraction and chemistry and connection that way, and that is okay. Like, just because it's not for you, that doesn't mean you should shame it in other people, right? It's not actually causing any harm. As long as it's consensual and among adults, there's no issue, right? At the heart of true consensual BDSM, for example, is respect and care. And a huge part of that is about the aftercare that you show your partner, and the author just straight up does not understand this. There's a bit that they write that says, A man who wants to be abusive in bed doesn't care about you. No man will say to you out loud that he gets off by being abusive in bed with a woman he actually loves and cares about. And it may seem like a sweeping statement to declare that a man who's fixated on extreme kinks with women doesn't care about them. However, some men possess a real dark side, and they don't look at sex with certain women in terms of seeking to establish a bond with another human being. Some men can get off on sheer humiliation through performing degrading sexual acts, just as easily as some men can compartmentalize women into being hoes versus angels they take home to meet their mother. They can compartmentalize sex in the same manner. Degrading, emotionless, humiliating sex with women they don't care about, versus sweet, passionate, sensual lovemaking with women they do actually care about. If he treats you badly in bed, he doesn't care about you. Again, no man who's into kinks will freely admit that out loud, but it's the cold, hard truth. It's a dirty little secret unbeknownst to women that must be brought to light so women can be more prudent in deciding whether they should go to bed with a man and when it would be very wise not to. And again, there's some truth in this, and there's also some massive falsehoods. A man or woman who gets off on actually abusing someone is an awful, awful person. Absolutely the case. That is one of the reasons that I hate non-consensual and abusive romance books, because that's not sexy, that's just abuse. It's not consensual non-consent, it's just non-consent romanticized. It's abuse. But in reality, in a real consensual relationship of this sort, it is about respect and trust and communication and genuinely caring about your partner. Partners have to discuss their boundaries beforehand. It's not about inflicting pain for the sake of it on another person, or even just the person inflicting the pain being the only one who enjoys it. It's still about pleasure for both parties. It's about the aftercare. It's about the trust. It's about the communication between everyone involved. And the author would know this if she'd spent even 5 minutes reading up about this subject or talking to someone in one of those communities who's into that stuff. Like, again, to say that a man into BDSM doesn't care about their partner is another blatant misrepresentation. If he doesn't care about his partner, then it's not BDSM, it is just abuse, and there is a difference. I won't read all of this out loud, but there's more misunderstandings and misrepresentations in this whole section. You can pause the video if you want to read them. There's also kind of like an irony here that the same newsletter who are posting this kind of like sexual shaming nonsense are also posting articles like this, trying to do the opposite. 11 signs you're suffering from sexual shame and how to overcome it. This article opens with a sadly all too familiar and very common story of a woman who spent her life surrounded by so much shame and stigma in regards to her sexuality that even when she was allowed to have sex after marriage, she felt unable to do it. It's interesting because this line in particular is brought up. What was supposed to be a night of passion, romance, and joy became a night filled with tears, apologies, and quiet cuddling. It would take over a year, 14 months, 1 week, and 3 days before she would finally have sex with her husband for the first time. And I found this really interesting because it's portrayed as something that's like really shocking and unusual, because it so often is expected amongst these conservative Christian communities that people who save themselves until marriage, it's expected that they will just go from 0 to 100 on their wedding night. And that is going to be intimidating for absolutely anyone, isn't it? However, in reality, for most people in most relationships, whether they're Christians or not, whether they've saved themselves till marriage or not, whether it's their first or nth relationship, whatever, most of the time, intimacy for a lot of people takes time. There's a lot of building up to it. And especially when it's your first partner, right? Like, I don't know about anyone else, and I don't want to, like, say anything too personal here and tell you about like my own experience, but I will just say that like when I first started dating people and I was with like, you know, my first person, like you definitely build up intimacy over a long time. Like you build up trust and care, and you don't just like decide this is the date, this is when I'm gonna do it, it has to all be done this night. You know, it's like you build up intimacy and trust, and physical touch comes bit by bit, right? Over, well, it's a different timeline for different people. For some people, it'll be a matter of weeks, some people months, some people even years. So I actually feel like this story of this woman needing several months of intimacy before she was ready to have sex with them, is really normal. Like, okay, maybe the 14-month period is a little longer than average, and maybe this is something which in most relationships happens before the wedding. But generally, I don't see anything wrong with it. I think once you've realised you're ready for a physical relationship for the very first time, it's normal to want that to build up in small stages. I think it's quite healthy to take things at your own pace like this. I do. So that's not a critique of this article, but just of kind of conservative values in general, if that makes sense. They then go on to talk about, like I say, some really important things, like the consequences of sexual shame. They talk about how women from conservative religious backgrounds often grow up viewing sex as a one-dimensional sin. Within the walls of their homes and many churches, it's portrayed as something degenerate, a tool of moral corruption, with little thought to the importance of differentiating between sex itself and what the Bible refers to as fornication. Unless, of course, you were married, then sex was acceptable, even necessary, but mainly for procreation. The problem, no one prepares these women for what happens when, after years of repression, the moment arrives, when the mind is finally saying yes, but the body is stuck on no, because you spent your life being taught to fear sex. It's not just your mind that absorbs the lesson, your body does too. And it goes on a little bit like this. All really great points, and this is something that I've spoken about in a hell of a lot of videos over the years, so I won't repeat myself too much, but I will just give you a few book recommendations for those of you who haven't heard them before. A couple of really good books on this topic are Beyond Shame, Creating a Healthy Sex Life on Your Own Terms by Matthias Roberts, The Purity Myth, How America's Obsession with Virginity is Hurting Young Women by Jessica Valenti, and Pure, Inside the Evangelical Movement That Shamed a Generation of Young Women and How I Broke Free by Linda K. Klein. You can check them out if you want. There's links in the video description. They are affiliate links, so if you buy any of the books with those links, I just get like a few pence towards putting back into my channel, and it all adds up and really helps. So thank you, but if you don't want to, that's okay too. Yeah, the article goes on, and again, I agree with a lot of this stuff. There is good stuff in here. You know, many women, especially those brought up in traditional Christian households, have unknowingly absorbed a deep-seated sense of shame around sex. It's as if there's an ever-present whisper in the back of our minds, quietly insisting that wanting, desiring, or fully enjoying sex is somehow dirty or wrong. But when we peel back the layers, we can see these beliefs are more rooted in culture than in scripture. Exactly. As someone raised by Christian parents and someone who is dedicating her life to the study and practice of human sexuality, trust me when I say the discomfort or guilt you may feel isn't something inherently biblical, rather it's a product of historical interpretations, societal expectations, and centuries of misunderstanding the true beauty and sacredness of sexual intimacy. And you might be thinking, well, this is great. This is really decent so far. Why are we talking about this magazine at all? Sure, they're a little bit hypocritical, but it's not that bad. Please, stay with me on this. We're starting with the good stuff and it all goes downhill from here. I also didn't think this seemed too bad when I started off researching this video, but then I started noticing a few little bits here and there. Like, for example, in this article on sexual shame, it goes on to say why, while sexual shame is bad and blah, 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 you should actually feel ashamed of sex in some situations, and how sex can be bad and wrong and awful if you're not married, and you should feel bad if that's you. So it's like, sexual shame isn't good, except in these circumstances where we will continue to shame you for it. Let's clear up a crucial distinction. Sex in and of itself is not biblically sinful. The notion that sexual desire is inherently wrong stems from a misunderstanding of the context in which sex was designed to thrive. When the Bible speaks of fornication, sex outside marriage, it is deemed sinful not because the sex itself is bad, but because it removes something sacred, intimate, and deeply vulnerable from the protective and loving framework of marriage. Seeking pleasure within marriage isn't something to feel guilty about. It's God's way of allowing couples to bond on every level, physically, emotionally, spiritually. The issue is not with sexual desire itself. It becomes problematic and risky only when it is misdirected outside the safety, love, and commitment of marriage. On a practical level, casual or uncommitted sex can introduce emotional complications, trust issues, and physical risks that undermine the very intimacy and fulfillment we seek. So they're not combating sexual shame like they claim they were. They're just trying to shove the shame from one area into another. They're still okay with sexual shame, just they're changing the context. Just like the last article, they're shaming people for having sex if it's a different kind of sex to what the author likes. Different to what the author likes, it's still exacerbating the culture of sexual shame. There's nothing wrong with a person wanting to wait for sex until marriage, but it should be something which is their choice, not something which they're shamed or scared into doing, right? And if a person doesn't want to wait, that should be absolutely acceptable too. So that particular part wasn't great, but the rest of the article was fine. It offered some tips for overcoming sexual shame, which maybe aren't the best. Like, it recommended things like positive visualization and vague stuff like that. But overall, it's not the worst thing I've ever seen, and I appreciated at least a little bit of what they were trying to do. And my cat's lost his arm. You okay there, baby? Oh, there you go. Sorry, it's absolutely freezing here at the minute in Leeds. It's so damn cold, and even with the heating on, I'm freezing. So I just got myself this new little hot water bottle, and he's so cute. He's a long boy hot water bottle. And he's wearing this little yellow jumper, and he's absolutely adorable. But his sleeves are too long for his arms, so I'm like, oh my god, he's like me. If I was a cat, I would be this cat. And the hot water bottle is literally his entire belly. He is so toasty and warm, and I love him. He's great. He's from House of Disaster, which I love. They make the cutest things, and I love him. So sorry, I'm snuggling this boy today to keep warm because my hands get so damn icy in the winter. Even with the heating on, even with like, I get the coldest hands. They are like ice right now, and I'm holding this boy. Okay, right, where were we? Okay, yes, okay. So that section, honestly, not that bad. Not that bad. There were some positives in there. Cool. Let's move on to some of the not so good stuff. And like I say, bear with me here, because each section is going to get slightly worse as we go through the video. Good times. I am calling this section Seduce Your Man, because there are a lot of Seduce Your Man articles. If the frequency of this type of article is anything to go by, I would argue that conservative women either have a really hard time pleasing their men, or they don't like men very much to begin with, or maybe it's just their men who aren't very desirable. I'm edging towards the latter one. I mean, have you seen conservative men? Seriously, the amount of times they have to be told to actively go have sex with their partners is interesting. You'd think if someone really wanted to do it, they wouldn't have to be told this much. And you know, obviously this, again, is not a bad thing in and of itself. It's about the context it's told in. But in these articles, it's usually a case of, if you want to be a real woman, you need to give your man sex whenever they want. It's not about what you want. As a woman, you owe it to him. And that's what I have a massive problem with. So let's look at a few examples. One of the ones I want to look at is called 5 Things Men Need from Their Wives. It starts off quite reasonable. A successful marriage is all about giving and receiving and not about keeping a scorecard. Love that. Wonderful. That's great. Then it goes downhill. Number 1 is he needs your trust. Sounds promising. Relationships are built on trust, right? Except in this case, needs your trust means never question anything he does or try to help him in any way. We've all heard the saying, men are to protect and provide. This phrase runs deeply in a man's psyche and is the reason why they can get defensive when we offer advice on how to do things or second guess their judgment. Ever tried giving your husband instructions on how to drive? They either get irritated or you end up arguing. Husbands need to feel they're capable of handling things without our help, so give them the gift of trust. Okay, so in summary, women, keep your silly little mouth shut around the big men, okay? This is in direct contrast to point 4 too, which is, women never help your man, but let him help you. Believe it or not, men love to make their wives happy, if we just let them. Let him help you lift heavy items or hold doors open for you. Just like us, men want to feel needed, and by accepting his help, it connects you as a couple and reaffirms the positive behaviour. So accepting his help connects you, but he can never accept your help because of his fragile masculinity. And here was silly old me thinking relationships should be a partnership. Ha! Going back to number 3, it was give him his freedom. Everyone needs freedom from the relationship from time to time. Absolutely fair. If he's out with the boys, let him have his man time. And don't be tempted to constantly text him with trivial questions. According to a 2013 study, women feel more positive and stable when texting frequently, but men who frequently receive texts from their partners feel less satisfied in the relationship. Constantly texting your husband can be seen as a subtle controlling behaviour which robs him of his privacy and freedom. That's what it can feel like to them, at least. It's a good example of the differences between what each gender needs from each other. Yes, it can feel scary not knowing every detail of what's going on in his day, but try to let go and use the free time to focus on yourself. How about practicing some self-care? Again, this doesn't sound too bad on the surface. Absolutely have alone time from each other, right? And trust each other when you're both out alone. That is all good. That's all fantastic and healthy. Except again, the way it's written is prioritizing the man and only the man. It says nothing about the woman's need for freedom or, you know, safety and trust and reassurance. It's like women feel more positive and stable when texting frequently, but men who frequently receive texts from their partner feel less satisfied in the relationship. So you acknowledge that the same actions can benefit one party but not the other. So their solution to this is, well, screw the women's needs, only focus on what the men want. And this doesn't even touch on the fact that not everyone like this. Not every couple is like this. How about, as a couple, you just discuss between yourselves what communication style you need from each other and expect from each other, and find a compromise that keeps everyone happy. It's not that difficult. But no, of course not. As a conservative, women must be the only ones to make sacrifice, because if you want stability and to feel safe, then you are robbing him of his privacy and freedom. Who cares if you feel scared? As the study suggests, just try and let go. Or you could just talk to each other, you know? And finally, the seduce your man point. Number 5, he needs sex. Everyone knows this is super important to men and women, but men really do need to have sex to feel connection in marriage. Of course, there are times when women can't, e.g. when anti-flow is in town or right after pregnancy. But if you're fit and healthy, having sex with your husband will bond the two of you like nothing else. Think about it like this. Imagine your husband is ill in bed and the only person who can help him is you. Not a friend or some random stranger. Only you can help him get better. That's what it's like for men. The sexual release makes them feel loved and better about everything. They can only turn to us wives for sex, so don't deprive them of it. Also, this whole like men really do need to have sex to feel connection in marriage thing. It's like, yeah, and women don't. Come on. Also, how does this work for same-sex couples? And what about asexual people? There are plenty of asexual men out there who don't need this. They just make a lot of big generalizations and assume that everyone feels the same. It's very annoying. Like I say, they go on to say that if you're fit and healthy, there's no reason to turn down sex whenever your husband demands it. Sure, you can straight after pregnancy, but if you're just not in the mood, then you're not allowed to say no, you silly woman. It is dangerous to promote this sort of thing. It really is. And also notice the things like them comparing a man wanting to have sex with him being ill in bed, and the only person who can help him is you. No, shut up. Shut up. Another article worth a quick look is one called 12 Practical Ways to Embrace Your Femininity, and this is mostly focused on reinforcing outdated gender roles and stereotypes and messed up ideas about gender identity and presentation, but it also tells us that the most feminine thing a woman can do is to seduce her husband even when she doesn't want to, apparently. For me, one of life's greatest and most simple pleasures is getting glammed up for a night out. I never feel more feminine than with some lipstick, a dress, and a pair of heels on. But every woman is different, and we don't always have to rely on traditionally girly ways to express our femininity. Some would say that femininity is merely a performance, but that's not really accurate. Femininity is something innate and inherent within each woman. A gift and a resource we can tune into and use to our advantage. It's how we choose to express it that is individualistic. The good thing about being a woman is that there are tons of ways to tune into our feminine side and expand our womanhood. Here are 12 practical ways to embrace your femininity besides putting on a dress. So this doesn't seem so bad so far, right? I'm glad she knows how to make herself happy, how she feels feminine, how she has her gender affirmed in this way, and I'm glad she's acknowledging that there are different ways for different women to express our gender identities. That's a good start, but it only goes downhill from here. So how do we apparently express this innate and inherent femininity? Well, by spraying some perfume, of course. If you're fun and flirty, you might rely on a more floral or sweet scent. If you're the more serious femme fatale type, you can try a musky, woodsy scent. Yeah, honestly, like a bit silly, but nothing too awful here. Choosing your own scent can give you confidence. I have different like perfumes and scents and body sprays and all sorts of things that I wear in different situations, because they each make me feel a different way about myself and make me feel good in different ways. Or I feel like some scents go with some outfits better than others, as silly as that sounds, you know. I do wonder, though, how this woman would react to knowing that, like, half the scents I use are men's ones. I love a men's fragrance. I have little men's, like, eau de toilettes and all sorts, because I just love the smell. Is that still me being feminine in your eyes? I don't know, I'd like to know. Then we start to devolve into the whole like traditional gender roles thing with cook a delicious meal. Cooking can be a relaxing and rewarding pastime, especially if we're putting love and care into whatever we're making. That's nice. The kitchen is a woman's domain in many households, and whatever meals she cooks for herself and her family reflect the time and attention, gorgeous, she dedicates to her household. If you're not exploring more adventurous meals or trying your hand at a certain technique, it's never too late to start. Would you like an extra cushion, babes? Yeah, the thing is though, like, some people don't like cooking. Some women don't like cooking. Love that for them. This idea that the kitchen is a woman's, is a woman, I'm so angry I can't speak. No, I'm not angry. The idea that the kitchen is a woman's domain is just like, can we just stop it, please? Can we please normalize grown men actually being able to cook for themselves and look after themselves? I would love that. Really would. Like, if this article was a list of like, hey, maybe do these things to make yourself feel a bit better when you're down, and it was stuff like spraying perfume and cooking, then I wouldn't have an issue with it. But when it's like, women, to be more feminine, get back in the kitchen and smell good, it's just a bit exhausting, isn't it? Oh, Crumbles. Even Kubi doesn't like it. She's like, I'm not going in the kitchen. Cheeky little lady. And of course, as a woman, a conservative woman, don't forget that your duty as a wife is to be nothing more than a chef and sex doll. Because number 4 is, of course, seduce your husband. One of the most powerful ways to exude natural femininity and encourage the expression of masculinity at the same time is through intimacy. Not only is it an opportunity for you and your husband to spend time together, but you can bask in your prowess as a woman and a lover by carefully curating and increasing anticipation. You'll feel in love and in tune with your femininity, and your man will appreciate it as well. Again, this might not be so bad on its own, but it's kind of ignoring the fact that people can still be super feminine while not being married, not being interested in men, and not being interested in sex at all, you know? But again, not the worst thing in the world, just interesting to look at as part of the bigger picture and problem with this magazine. A very similar article is 4 Qualities of an Irresistible Woman. Do you know that girl? The girl who walks into a room and commands it. She's beautiful and charming. All the girls want to be her, and the guys want to be with her. You have it within you to be an irresistible woman just like her. Aw, they're describing you, baby. Yeah. Irresistible, charming, gorgeous, gorgeous girl. She's so sleepy. Again, this article starts off with quite like good things, like be playful. It's good to be able to have a laugh, right? Love that. That's nice. And then it goes on to say like things like, an attractive woman is confident, but not too confident. You wouldn't want to be seen as assertive or heavy-handed. You don't want to seem entitled, do you? But the thing is, they never say this about confident men, do they? Like, with men, they can be as confident as they want as they're praised for it. Women are allowed to be a little bit confident, but only with a long list of caveats, you know? We can be confident in the wrong way. We can have too much confidence. We're only allowed to be confident in the areas that men say it's okay for us to be confident in. And the truth is, a lot of the time, this is because men are intimidated by confident women. Simple as that, and they want to put them down. You know? How about we just encourage women to have self-confidence without all the rules and the like, without this, don't be... How about we just encourage women to be confident for their own benefit and not just so they can impress a man, yeah? How about you be a confident woman because it's going to make you feel good, not because if you're the right kind of confident but not too confident, then you might impress a man. Enough of that. It's so outdated. This whole part of the article is just subtly steeped in misogyny. It just is. And then, of course, one of the final things is that women have to be nurturing, because of course we do. If we're not nurturing, then we're seen as failures as women, which is absolute nonsense, of course. Again, I'd much prefer we just encourage women, and in fact all people, to just be kind and caring and supportive of others without making out like women are the only people who are supposed to be or who can be or saying they should be caregivers in society, and how it's somehow like a failing of us as women if we don't constantly look after someone else to our own detriment, you know? Like, there's that last line there about how one of the best compliments a woman can give a man is that he makes her feel safe, which honors his masculinity. You in turn can make a man feel safe by being nurturing, and in doing so, you're allowing him to honor your femininity. Or we could just encourage partners to look after each other. to take care of and nurture each other. Why does it have to be so gendered? And they always go on about like, oh, you know, men are going to make you feel safe. You make us feel safe from what? Protect us from what? Other men? So you're acknowledging that men can be pretty dangerous? Anyway, it's very much like men are like, we can be a threat, so let us protect you from us, and therefore you need us, and in return, you be our mothers. It's not really fair, is it? The last article I want to share in this section is, unlike the others, it really is something. This one has the summary line of, an important aspect of celebrating your femininity is embracing your sensuality and cultivating your sexual energy with your husband. Okay, if you say so. Yeah. And this article is titled, A Wife's Secret to Making Yourself Taste Delicious. And yes, this is talking about vaginas. Well, kind of more specifically vulvas, but the whole area. I didn't mind it at first. It's a little graphic, like some of the others, but not necessarily in a bad way. You know, but then again, it just kind of devolves into mild erotica, you know? I remember when my moment happened. It was a hot Sunday afternoon, and I'd been tanning by the pool while my husband played his weekend tennis match. He came home just as I was preparing a snack for him in my tiny orange bikini. He normally goes for a quick shower, but I soon felt his hands cupping my bum and his lips on my neck. Before I knew it, I was naked on my back on the kitchen table, my hands in his hair as his head moved down between my legs. I was ready, blah blah blah. Point is, she thinks she tasted bad down there and it put her husband off a bit, blah blah blah. I feel like we don't necessarily need these graphic stories about your personal sex life, but, you know, to each their own. It's not necessarily bad, it's just a lot and a tad hypocritical when you're shaming other women for being sexual in different areas, you know? Anyway, the article itself does actually start off absolutely fine. It talks about the importance of maintaining your pH balance down there, keeping clean. This is all really good stuff, which immediately goes out of the window when she starts recommending rinsing your vulva with the incredibly acidic pineapple juice and other foods. Also, my jaw cracked then. Oh, I don't know if the mic picked up on that, but that was unpleasant. I didn't think I would ever bring up YouTube legend Tom Scott in a segment on vulva health, but here we are. I love Tom Scott, he's great. Does anyone here remember how Tom Scott got started on YouTube? Because his first video, or one of his first videos, very old now, he's almost unrecognisable in it. He's got the long hair, he's at uni. He was trying to find out whether it was true or not that you could burn off your fingerprints with pineapple juice. And he never got that far. He never fully burnt off his fingerprints because he had to stop because his fingers were so sore and irritated. He was in genuine pain and he couldn't keep touching things and go about his day-to-day life and do his regular job because the acid had damaged his fingers so much. Now, if pineapple juice can do that over a short period of time to your fingers, which has some of the toughest skin on the human body, imagine what it's going to do to some of the most sensitive skin on the human body. Now, I know she's not saying soak your vulva in this acid, but even splashing acid on there is going to mess up your pH a lot. So the vagina and therefore the vulva naturally sit around a pH of about 3.8 to 4.5, which is a little acidic. It will vary from person to person. It will vary throughout your cycle. That is very normal. But pineapple juice is more acidic. That sits between a pH of 2.5 and 3.9. She also recommends you might want to splash cranberry juice on there, which has a pH of about 2.6, also far too acidic. If you're doing this once, it might be okay, but if you're doing this regularly, even just like once a week, you know, that can be really disruptive. It could make you quite sore if you do it a lot. It's just not a good idea. She also recommends things like you smother your vulva in yogurt to keep it, and I quote, fresh and ready for anything. Now, there are some people who believe that some yogurts can help treating yeast infections down there because some yogurts contain a type of lactobacillus, type of bacteria. However, when you're using food as opposed to actually antifungal medications, you can't be sure of what dose you're getting down there. It won't be as effective. You could kind of go too over the top with the bacteria. Like, there's a lot of things that can go wrong. The other thing is, it just doesn't work. Even though there's a type of lactobacillus found in the vagina and in yogurts, they're not the same kind, and the one in the yogurts doesn't kill off yeast. It just simply doesn't. But aside from that, if you're just doing it to freshen up, it might not be the most damaging, but just don't bother, because it won't actually do anything at all, and just warm water alone is fine. She also suggests maybe using coconut oil. This is one of the few things she suggests that is actually fine and safe, no issues there. Some people use coconut oil as a natural alternative to lube. If you're allergic to some things in lube, coconut oil can be a good alternative. That's fine. Unless I'm wrong and there's some problems I don't know about, correct me in the comments if so. But I think that's okay. And then she recommends using mint tea to rinse your vulva. Again, not a good idea. So again, you risk upsetting that acidity balance and making your vagina more alkaline than it's used to. You're messing up the balance even if you're just splashing around the outside, you know? This is why you have to be very careful with like what soaps and stuff you use in the shower, and you don't want to get it around your vulva, you know? She finally tells you to rub pieces of fruit like pineapple or strawberry on your vulva. Now, you're not only messing with the pH levels down there, but all that natural sugar from the fruit could cause you a hell of a lot of trouble. Every vagina naturally has a balance of bacteria and yeasts, and that is completely normal and natural and healthy. However, you start rubbing fruit on your vulva and you're introducing a lot of sugar down there that shouldn't be there. You're giving those naturally occurring bacteria and fungi something to feed off. They're going to start growing at a quicker rate than normal, and that's how you can end up with bacterial and yeast infections that get out of control. Do not rub food on your vagina. Do not put acids on your vagina. Don't do this stuff. Also, I'll show you my search history when I was researching this part of the video. This is why I tell my friends to like never judge me if they like see my search history or weird stuff on my phone or laptop. I'm just like, I do weird things for work, okay? But yeah, no, like to kind of like summarize and clarify, just putting this stuff on your vulva isn't as bad as, say, for example, shoving it in your vagina. But either way, please don't take the risk. You could really mess yourself up down there, and it's just not worth it. If you want to keep clean, wash around your labia with warm water, or if you really feel you need something else, you can occasionally use a pH balanced, dermatologically tested wash, like FemFresh for example, to just wash slightly around the vulva and just kind of like inside the outer labia. You want to change your underwear regularly, wear breathable fabrics, and of course wipe properly when you go to the toilet, and keep yourself clean when you're using the bathroom. It's that simple. Regular warm water and maybe like a soft cloth if you want is all you need. You don't need to be shoving foods and acids down there. It's not. If you want to introduce a little flavor, then yeah, there are flavored lubes you can use. But again, use them sparingly and be very careful about which one you pick and how often you use it, because again, they can often contain sugars, which you don't want down there. So do your research and please be very, very careful. And if you're in doubt, don't shove it on your vulva, all right? The whole next section of articles I want to look at are their anti-feminist and anti-woke content, and there is a lot of this. There was so much I could talk about, but I've just picked a few of the most recent articles for ease. This one is titled, "Was Feminism a PSYOP to get women to pay more taxes to the government?" It's been said that the first building block of a dynasty is the self-sufficient home. Women's traditional roles were a crucial part of creating independence and freedom from the corrupt state for the family. And to this author, I just have to ask, who do you think organised this psychological operation? Which government do you mean? Which country? Is this just an American thing? Because you realise feminism helps women all over the world, right? Life exists outside of America. Also, yeah, sure, right, when more women work, they pay more taxes. But again, please tell me why this is a bad thing. More taxes mean better funding, but also, feminism has not just led to women paying more taxes, but also women getting the vote, being able to be members of parliament, and work in that very same government that you seem to think is plotting something. It's just a very stupid conspiracy theory that is not well thought out and makes no sense. Do they really want us to think that, ooh, let's give the women some of these rights so they can pay more taxes and then we'll have more money to put back into running the country effectively, is a bad thing. I know a lot of conservatives don't like paying taxes because they want to hoard all their wealth and don't like helping other people, but they're wrong, so who cares what they think? Women held the crucial position of community organisers, teachers, mothers, homemakers, good Samaritans of the underprivileged through church-related efforts, holistic nutritionists, midwives and healers, long before feminism was ever a glimmer in a suffragette's eye. Women held these important positions not because they had been forced to be there, but because their natural skill sets and their personalities drew them to these areas of expertise. The roles held by women in pre-feminism were indeed valued and seen as essential and honourable. Yeah, and working class women were also farmers, factory workers, servants, housekeepers, cooks, healers, tanners, cloth makers, miners, all before feminism. I've spoken about women in my family who were nail makers. They were literally working in a forge, hammering away, working with metal, making nails. Women, especially lower and working class women, have always had to work and had roles outside of just homemaker and mother. They just didn't have any rights when it came to keeping their own money, choosing their own government, or being treated equally to men. They've always had the same responsibilities, just without the rights. This idea that women held these important positions not because they've been forced to be there, but because their natural skill sets and personalities drew them to these areas of expertise. Like, do they want to try and say this? To say, and I've spoken about this before, I had an ancestor who was she would have been a great aunt or something. She died in a mining disaster, in the Husker Pit mining disaster, when she was just 10 years old. She was a 10-year-old girl working in a mine. Do you think, as a child, she chose to do that job because of her natural skill sets? Or do you think perhaps she was forced into it because her family needed to eat and she had no other choice? And what about all the women who were naturally intelligent and wanted to get an education and trained to be a doctor, a lawyer, a banker, but they weren't allowed simply because they were women? The roles held by women in the pre-feminism world were indeed valued and seen as essential and honourable. Okay, well, if this is true, then why weren't they paid the same as men? Why were they not given the same rights as men? Why were a lot of these roles not paid at all? Why could these women not have their own bank accounts or own their own property? Why weren't more men taking on these roles? If being a homemaker or a stay-at-home parent, for example, is so honourable, then why weren't more men choosing to do it? This is not to say there were no women-specific issues that caused life to be challenging. Certainly the past was a brutal place for all who inhabited it. But it is to say that women have always been empowered through work within and outside the home. But what if the idea that women need an ideological political movement or a pantsuit in order to become who they're really meant to be is merely a psyop, intended in reality to make them taxable, accounted for, obedient workers? So you admit women have faced discrimination, and yet you still jump to, and therefore this must all be some massive conspiracy. Look, if there was a big conspiracy to increase the amount of taxes people pay, it would be much easier to just tax the rich a little bit more than to spend 100 years or so trying to get women the rights to vote and then work and then just so they can pay more taxes. You know what I mean? Trust me, target the rich, you'll get a lot more money a lot quicker. They're the ones hoarding all the wealth, not some woman working in a factory for less than minimum wage. Yeah? The author then goes on to talk about the Marxist roots of feminism. And I'm not going to sit here and be all like, yes, I'm a through and through Marxist. I don't believe that an entirely classless society and redistribution of wealth is either realistic or a good idea. But I do think the core of Marxism, which is understanding that people who own the means of production often exploit their workers and that there are fundamental flaws with a purely capitalist society, I do believe there's some truth in that. So I wouldn't say I'm a Marxist, but I do agree with some of the underlying ideas. Does that make sense? And I do also think it's important to look at the relationship between Marxism and feminism, because you need to understand the class struggles in various societies to see how it affected different kinds of women. Women in different classes throughout history have had different struggles and faced different kinds of inequality and oppression, depending on, what class they were in, where they were born, what their family did, all that sort of thing. It's a really interesting but complex issue. So, for example, upper class women often faced a lot of oppression in the form of high expectations, not being allowed to choose who they married, not being allowed to work even if they wanted to, not having their own money, but essentially being sold like cattle between men, you know? However, they did have access to a lot more education, and so they had, in some ways, more freedoms than other women. On the other hand, working class women could work and earn money, but they weren't allowed to have bank accounts to put it in. They had more choice over who they married and if they married at all. However, they were still reliant on men in their lives to home them because because often they weren't allowed to own property of their own. These women could work, but they were still paid considerably less than men, and some professions were just entirely ruled out for them. All women, regardless of class, were facing some form of discrimination. They had no bodily autonomy or control of their sexuality or reproductive health. A lot of them were victims of domestic violence, and that was legal in a lot of cases, and that is just barely scratching the surface. The author of this article, though, seems to either be just not understanding this, or willfully oversimplifying and missing the point, or maybe even just misrepresenting the point. They say that apparently the only link between feminism and Marxism is that feminism uses the same dichotomy, but instead of oppressor and oppressed being seen from the economic standpoint, it's seen from the perspective of gender. Both Marxism and feminism are ideological perspectives pertaining to power in society, who has it and its rightful distribution. The haves and have-nots become the masculine and feminine. Both ideologies seek the same end via leveling natural differences of competence, skill, ambition, ability, and economic or genetic inheritance in the pursuit of equality. They claim that meritocracy is flawed, that the natural order was rigged, and by lifting the weak up and keeping the strong down, everyone would be freer. Of course, the opposite is true. Have you ever seen someone miss so many points at once? Two big things to take away from this. One, did they really just say out loud that we should keep the weak down and raise up the already strong? I think they said the quiet part out loud there. And two, no Marxist or Marxist feminist is against meritocracy. That's just not even close to true. However, we do want everyone to have equal access to opportunity, but we're not just saying, oh, you should be given whatever you want at any time, but you should have the opportunity to be able to earn it, you know? Mm-hmm. Take a random woman from a working class family in the, late 1800s, for example, right? If meritocracy was real, then she could just work really, really hard and achieve as much as any other person, right? She could become the richest, most successful person in the country, right? But of course she couldn't, because she wasn't allowed pretty much basic education, never mind further education. She most likely had to leave school at 9 or 10 years old, if not earlier, if she went at all to help her family earn money. And in those jobs, she would only be able to progress so far. She would always be earning less than the men around her, and she would never have the opportunity to be a manager or own her own business or go on to, higher roles and that sort of thing. So how could she compete with others on skill alone? She can't, because it's not a meritocratic system, it's an oppressive one. In an actual meritocracy, whatever circumstances she's born into, she'd have access to the same opportunities as anyone else. We're more meritocratic now than we used to be, but still not completely. Not by a long shot. Women were hoodwinked by feminism to believe they have no power if not the power of a man. Nothing could be further from the truth. Men and women lay claim to complementary but essentially different kinds of power. To say that women are powerless because they don't have the power that men have is to not understand feminine power at all. Women have their own gender-specific, life-giving power, which is creative and nurturing at its core, without which civilization could not function. Just as men are with their protective, labouring, and innovative prowess. Both are necessary, and despite what feminism claims, they are not interchangeable. So, let me get this right. Women's power was, we can birth children, but we have no choice over when or why or how often. However, men get to control their lives, have money and property, and have more freedoms. Yeah, that doesn't seem fair. They're not equal powers. Did you know men used to be able to sell their wives? Like, literally, if they didn't like their wives, they could take them out into the street and sell them to another man. This mostly happened around the 17th century, and into the 18th as well. Sometimes a little bit in the 19th. The last known case, though, was in 1913. That's barely over 100 years ago. You want me to believe that a woman has power because, wait, what was it you said gave a woman feminine power? She has power because she can put on perfume, decorate her home, and she has to have sex with her husband when he wants, and she can cook. And that's apparently an equal but different power to a man being able to sell his wife if he's not satisfied with her. Get out of here. I am so sick of this, like, different but equal, different but equal. No. Different, yes. Equal, not even close. No. And they always go about how, like, oh, well, men have this innate thing. No, I'm sorry. There is nothing you can say that would make me believe there is some magical biological difference in men, which means he should innately have the right to sell another human being. In fact, the equal pay for equal work slogan of today's feminists was officially legislated for the first time by Lenin's Bolshevik government. By pushing women out of the home, Marxists were able to achieve two goals at once. They destroyed the biologically strong glue of the nuclear family while doubling their workforce. Okay, except why is the nuclear family so good that it should be upheld above anything else? Nuclear families aren't natural, they're a social construct, and there have been different family structures occurring in different societies throughout history from the dawn of humanity. We haven't always just had the nuclear family, different structures work for different groups. I'm sorry, but equal work for equal pay isn't about doubling the workforce, it's about paying the women who were already in the workforce fairly and equally for doing the exact same jobs as men. And it's about calling out the fact that all these housewives and homemakers and parents that you keep going on about, they're so important, they're so important. Yes, they were important, and they were doing the most unpaid labor out of anyone. How is that fair? By pushing women out of the home to make a living alongside their husbands, the labour force effectively doubled, keeping wages down for employers and drastically raising the number of subjects that the state can tax. And this is the crux of their argument, but again I have to say, who pushed women out of the home? Who? No one. Working class women were already working outside of the home, they just want to be treated fairly and paid fairly for their jobs. And upper class women simply wanted the choice of whether they were allowed to work or not, whether they were allowed to get an education or not. No one's pushing anyone. And also, how is women asking, hey, pay us the same as the men please, keeping wages down? You are talking out of your bum and can't even get your facts straight. And of course, the consequences of this dramatically increased the wealth of those most wealthy and increased the reliance on and power of the state while making the single income household the last vestige of individual liberty, a relic of the past. But you were just blaming Marxists who want to get rid of those they don't want to make the rich richer. What you're saying about increasing the wealth of the richest, that is a direct consequence of capitalism, not Marxism. That is the opposite of what Marxists are fighting for. You can't see the consequences of capitalism and blame Marxists for it. That makes no sense. Feminism furthers this aim by incentivizing and persuading women to leave the home to work instead of raising children and playing an active role in their education/religious upbringing. These roles are now outsourced, paid for and taxed by a mother's income. Okay. And not every person is equipped to be a good carer and teacher to kids. Why not outsource it to someone who is literally skilled and trained in those areas and chooses to do it if you can? How is that a bad thing? I am terrible at keeping my flat clean. I'm not good at cleaning, so I hire a cleaner and she comes every week and does that job for me, and I pay her with the money I earn from my job. She is more skilled at it than me, so my house is cleaner than it would be otherwise. I don't have to do something I hate and can focus on doing something I love. How is that a bad thing? Would you rather I had a less clean house and did it all myself and made myself miserable and didn't get to do a job that I love? It makes no sense. And back to the education thing, right? I am more than happy to pay taxes when it pays for a quality education for other people's children. I am never going to have children that benefit from that, but I want to pay my taxes to benefit other people's. Like, who wouldn't? It's not a bad thing. I'm... God's sake. The most nefarious result of feminism is possibly the misdirection involved in pitting men against women and making men the source of all women's hardships. Rather than teaching women to take ownership of their situation and facilitating a belief that women thriving in their natural roles is not only enough but essential, Women are trapped in a constant hamster wheel of trying to be a great employee and a great mother at the same time. No wonder so many women feel like failures. By making men the scapegoat for historical and modern issues facing women, elites and social engineers of the day conveniently get overlooked in their role in keeping both men and women down, not to mention what they have gained from this movement. What's bad for the family home is great for the economy from a taxation point of view. Everything from high divorce rates, which is big business nowadays, to paying for the help once done by extended family benefits the GDP. Men aren't the scapegoats. They're literally the ones oppressing people. She's all like, this is all big government's big terrible plan. But before feminism, who was the government? Men. Only men. So, are you saying the government is to blame, which is men, but then men aren't to blame, and how dare they blame men because it's not men's fault, but the men are doing it? It makes no sense. Also, I'm sorry, but you need to make up your mind here, right? Apparently. So let's go through all the arguments made in this article so far, right? Feminism is bad because it lowered wages, meaning that single income households aren't possible anymore, but they also increased divorce rates, meaning we have more single parent and single person households with one income. So, what? Feminism caused single income households to not be possible whilst also increasing single income households. Make up your mind. They're also complaining about paying for the help once done by extended family for free. Yes, because labour should not be free. They're like, oh no, now we have to pay people for the work they do instead of getting freebies. How terrible. Come on. Even stay-at-home parents don't deserve to be putting in such hard, continuous labour for free. And no, having a partner who works when you're not allowed to doesn't mean you're being paid. It means you're financially dependent on them and not actually earning anything yourself, and you're still providing labour for free in the hopes that they don't leave you to starve, or in the past, sell you. In the closing thoughts, they say British author G.K. Chesterton once said, "Feminism is a muddled idea that women are free when they serve their employers, but slaves when they help their husbands." Why do conservatives keep doing this like, oh my god, feminism made women slaves to employers thing, but they're also like, it's a man's natural role to go out and earn. So by that logic, aren't men slaves to their employers too? Is it okay to enslave men so long as those men also enslave women? If everyone is enslaved by employers, it's bad. But if there is a chain of enslavement with women at the bottom, then everything is good. This is one of the stupidest and silliest articles I've read, full of misunderstandings, misrepresentations, factual inaccuracies, just a lot of stupidity, to be honest. A lot of contradictions. It's not very good. Very, very bad. In another article, they titled, "Today's empowered women are weaker than women of the past." The women of our great-grandmother's generation raised children and made a living during the Great Depression. They did so with much grit, ingenuity, and resolve. They were women of true strength and should be held up as the paragons of empowered women. The gist of this article is basically, women have always suffered, but women today are awful because women today dare to speak out against suffering, and if you're a real woman, you should shut up and suffer in silence. Not even joking, that's the whole point of this. To compare the portrait of the typical woman of the Great Depression era with that of today's feminist is illuminating. Many worked while continuing to fulfill their role as homemaker. This task became quite challenging during the Great Depression as money and resources were scarce. Rather than claim victimhood, however, the plucky women of the 30s faced hardship head-on and found creative ways to overcome. They stretched and saved their hard-earned dollars by performing laborious tasks, such as sewing the family's clothing and canning fruits and vegetables. If they couldn't work outside the home, they doubled their domestic tasks by taking on laundry, mending, and cleaning of others who were willing to pay. I thought we weren't meant to outsource and pay for anything, we had to just do it all ourselves. So what you're saying in the last article? Come on. But yeah, and so what? Today, plenty of women also have to work several jobs and take care of their homes. The only difference is the economy is in, ever so slightly, a better position now than it was during the 30s, and our standard of living has improved as well. That's about it. The economy is still crap in many places around the world. I can't speak for the American economy, I don't know, but yeah. Also, we're better off because women have more job opportunities today, thankfully. Women have more access to education today, thankfully. A lot of women today finally have the choice where they don't have to scrimp and save because they can actually have a career in which they're paid fairly, or not as fairly as they should be, but more fairly than they used to be. Sadly, some people still don't have that option, and that's not something to applaud and be like, oh, look at them, they're the real women. No, they deserve better. No one should have to work this much for a minimum wage just to live. They deserve better. The modern feminist enjoys convenience and comforts. Doesn't everyone? The women of the Great Depression made do without the modern conveniences and luxuries that we take for granted today. They relied on their own craftiness, genius, and vigour to do what was necessary for the survival of their families. They didn't shun their natural inclinations towards motherhood and homemaking, but rather took on the responsibilities associated with the role of women with all grace and courage. Feminism, in its wayward mission to inspire women to become bold and strong, has actually served to do the opposite. Feminism has created a generation of women that is in fact weaker than the ones who have gone before us. Except not all of us have a natural inclination towards motherhood. We just don't. I know I'm not shunning anything. I'm just not that way inclined. And it's nice that I had the choice to pursue the lifestyle of being child-free, which is what comes naturally to me. Some of my ancestors, I'm sure they didn't want kids, but they were forced into it. And that's not something I would wish on them. I would rather me not be here and they'd been able to lead the life they wanted, you know? I think it's a good thing that women who want to be parents today can be when they choose to be, not when they're forced to be. Also, does he also not realise that women even back then weren't happy? They might have had to put up with it, but that didn't mean they were happy about it. Not every woman was sitting there silently with grace and courage. There were plenty who were miserable and angry and actively trying to fight the status quo. And as for calling women today weaker, are you joking? Just because we have different lifestyles, that doesn't mean we're weaker. Strength isn't suffering in silence. Strength is having the courage to see suffering, whether it's your own or someone else's, and stand up and say, hang on a minute, that's not fair. Let's do something about that. That said, yes, we do have more rights now, and our lives are easier in a number of ways. But how is that a bad thing? That is not something to be ashamed of. This is exactly what feminists over the years have been fighting for. They didn't want future generations, us, to just scrape by and have our families just survive. They wanted future women to thrive, just like we now should want future women and generations to to thrive. Do you think I speak about half the topics I do for myself? No, because most of them don't affect me. I do it for other women around the world, for future generations, for other people, so they don't have to suffer. Future women reaping the benefits of our fight does not make them weak. It makes them deserving. They are living as they will hopefully be living as they deserve to. Just because I've had to grow up in a world where men have sexually harassed and assaulted me just for existing, that doesn't mean I want future women to have to go through the same thing. They're not weak if they get to live in a safe world. That's what they deserve. What kind of awful person has the attitude of, well, I had to have it tough, so I want all future people to struggle as much as I did? It's horrible. No. The typical feminist of our day is a young, college-educated woman with no children. Well, I'm two of those things. She enjoys a good salary and the comforts of a wealthy society. She doesn't toil away perfecting the domestic arts, as the surge of feminism in the 1960s, which sent women away from the home and into the workforce, was spurned by the invention and/or prevalence of many conveniences, such as freezer meals, washing machines, and vacuums. That's it, women. If you want to be a real woman, throw out your Hoover. The modern feminist enjoys all this ease and comfort, but also suffers under the weight of her victim status. God's sake. Ignoring the last line. Again. And this is a good thing. This is what feminists of the past were asking for. That's not something to be ashamed of because we're reaping the benefits now. And again, not every feminist is a victim or feels like a victim or wants to be identified as a victim. Sure, modern feminists have different worries and struggles and face different issues than what feminists of the past faced, but that doesn't mean we are wallowing in victimhood. It means we're doing things like standing up for our right to bodily autonomy. We're trying to make sure that women all over the world have the same rights as men do. We're calling out things like child marriage and female genital mutilation. We're understanding the need for intersectional feminism and understanding why things like race, class, sexuality, and ability, amongst other things, are all interconnected with gender identity. What this article is just saying is stop learning, stop trying to stand up for these things, and go back to scrubbing pots by hand in a kitchen for no pay 24 hours a day, yeah? And that's just not fair. The article goes on to say that by asserting that femininity, which is bound up in the natural functions and abilities of women, doesn't or can't empower a woman, feminism holds that a woman can never be strong by embracing her true identity. Rather, she must go against herself and become like her so-called oppressor in order to reach new heights. Her strength, therefore, comes not from within. But what does this even mean? It's a bunch of nonsense. Feminism is all about giving women the right to choose for themselves and have equal access to opportunities. It's more about helping women embrace their true identity than this magazine who just want to force everyone to be a 1950s housewife. Or should I say a 1950s American housewife, because in the UK, the 50s was not a glamorous time for anyone. And again, I'm so confused. If women aren't meant to be thinking or learning or speaking and instead be nothing more than hyper-feminine homemakers, then why are you writing this article? Why is the editor of this magazine a woman? Shouldn't she get back in the kitchen? Shouldn't she throw out all her technology and just be doing that instead of speaking to the world? How dare she own any money? Running a magazine isn't very feminine, it's not very strong. In fact, it seems pretty weak by these standards. Why isn't she out here living in poverty, raising her 10 children in Depression-era America, Why is she so weak? Do you see what I mean? These women are so happy to utilize the benefits that feminism has provided for them in order for them to make money that they wouldn't have once been allowed to make from their anti-feminist messages, and yet they don't realize what massive hypocrites they are. If you really are against feminism, then sit down, shut up, get back in the kitchen, give up all your money, and let the men do the talking for you, yeah? This isn't the way in which our great-grandmothers understood their womanhood. Speak for yourself, love. They didn't view themselves as victims, but rather as the bastions of the home, the community, and indeed an entire culture. Their strength was born of a realization and honing of their unique abilities to contribute to grow and uphold the world in which they lived, however cruel that may have been. Women in those days understood the biological differences between males and females and saw them as natural and good. Of course, you had to get a little transphobia in there, didn't you? They took pride in childbearing and rearing, again, not all of them, homemaking, and even providing and often even providing an income for their family. Their strength came from within, from an understanding of their true identity. There's a lot of idealizing these women from the past without knowing what they were actually like. Like I've spoken about in other videos, I have great-grandmothers who refused to ever get married, even though everyone around her was judging her for having kids outside of marriage and, not telling people who the dad was. But she knew she didn't want a man, and she just wanted to be a working mother, and she did it. The women in my family, looking back, have always been strong and independent. There was none of this quietly sitting down and taking crap from a man. I mean, that's not to say men didn't try, but you can't speak for entire generations of women when you don't know what they were like. Feminism didn't start with the suffragettes. That's just when it got the name. There's always been strong, independent women who wanted more for other women since, again, the dawn of humanity. Women would be far better off if we looked to the lion-hearted woman of the past and followed their example, forging ahead with confidence in our womanhood and all the gifts and abilities which it endows. Trust me, love, I am. The women in my family have always worked and been as equal to a man as they possibly could be. They have fought for that, and I would rather use them as my inspiration than your fictional, quiet little woman who suffered in silence, I'm gonna listen to the real women. Real as in they exist, not real as in like, ooh, this is what a real woman is. You know what I mean? Anyway, in another article, there's a different author who writes about how conservatives are the cool countercultural kid. This is really hard to say. The cool countercultural kids these days. Conservatives are basically this generation's punks. Their words, not mine. Because they're the ones pushing back against what is normal, except they're not, but okay. This is 5 ways to live counterculturally. Being a revolutionary has been reduced to an aesthetic, from hashtag activism to social media virtue signaling. The punks and hippies of decades past aren't rebels anymore. They're now faithful servants to the establishments they once fought to dismantle. Nowadays, it's more countercultural to be old-fashioned rather than instantly adopting the newest cultural trend. Our culture has become so toxic that regular people seeking healthy, normal lives and who value truth over feelings are the new subversives. All things that once were the underpinnings of our culture have been turned on their head, and we've seen the breaking down of cultural norms ever since. Happy families are considered rare. Men and women are at odds with one another. Yeah, like that's not always been the case. And much work has been done to divide and conquer the population on the basis of race and economic status. Again, like that hasn't always been the case. Thankfully, the pendulum always swings back, and in rejection to the decay and degeneration which has resulted from social justice, cultural Marxism, and critical theory, people are looking back to simpler times for answers for how to build their lives, because the common narrative of casual sex, corporate ladders, and being happy just the way we are is obviously not some newly invented path to happiness. Here are 5 ways you can fight the culture of meaninglessness. And you know what? I hate to admit it, but I think they're right about one thing: the whole pendulum swinging thing. I think society as a whole does tend to swing from one extreme to the other on really big issues, but that is where my agreement with them ends. The other bits I want to focus on are, well, actually, I'll just pick out one bit here. I don't understand why so many conservatives get so angry about the idea of just being happy the way we are. Ali Beth Stuckey had a whole book about it, which I reviewed recently, and it all comes back to the point that in order to control people, you need them to be vulnerable and unhappy, right? If a person is confident in themselves, self-assured, happy, knows their worth, then you can't control them. It's that simple. So this is the only real reason that conservatives like this push this narrative that, like, oh, you shouldn't just be happy with who you are, because self-assured adults are difficult to control and they don't want that. Blah, blah, blah. Okay, to be countercultural, make marriage and family a priority. The mainstream culture encourages us to see marriage as an outdated and risky arrangement, only to be entered into after potentially dating for a decade. Men and women alike have been made to think of sex as a casual and consequence-free act that you do for fun or purely for the sake of pleasure. I have to disagree with this. I think you're wrong. I think marriage still is, in so many cultures around the world, seen as the norm. Even if fewer people are not actually getting married or are getting married later, more people than ever, like myself, are choosing not to do it at all. But that's not because society's telling us it's bad. If anything, I still constantly get people asking me why I'm not married yet, when will you get married? And they see it as some sort of failure. It's not that we're being told marriage is outdated and risky. It's just that for a lot of us, when we think about it for ourselves and actually have a choice over if and when and why we get married, a lot of us have realized, actually, maybe not for me. Or maybe another time. Oh, maybe, yeah. Less marriage isn't about people falling to cultural pressures. It's about people actually deciding for themselves what they want, regardless of cultural pressures, you know? Also, their line about casual sex, if people want to think of sex as casual, fun, and for pleasure, then what is the problem with that? Again, as long as everyone involved is on the same page, they're all adults, there's consent, there's communication, where is the problem? These conservative articles say that a lot of things are bad without ever explaining why they're supposed to be bad. Those of us who wish to avoid the damage that can be done by sleeping around say no to casual sex. They date to marry, and instead of becoming sexually experienced, they develop themselves into marriage material, so the person they attract is interested in them for other reasons than just because they're good in bed. When men and women prioritize making themselves into marriage material, they attract partners who are marriage material. Oh, yes, I like this girl. Good stretches? Yeah, you happy? He's so sleepy. Oh, me too, babes. Me too. Okay, but does he also realize that you can be marriage material and sexually experienced? They're not mutually exclusive. I also don't know anyone who went and married someone just because they were good in bed. Not everyone thinks about sex as much as repressed conservatives do, let's be honest. It is okay for people to want different things in a partner, and to want a partner who shares the same values as you. Articles like this tell you to act a certain way to attract a certain type of partner, and they just assume that you should and will want a partner like that. But what if we don't? What if your concept of marriage material is different from my concept of marriage material? Then we get shamed for wanting the wrong things. It's wild. We've been told by every authority figure our entire lives that women must not rely on men, we must be independent and spend our 20s trying to establish a career. This situation just finds women in their 30s with a livable salary but lower chances of finding a good man. If women plan on having a career, that's great, but finding someone to build a family with who can support and care for you should be the priority. Be a rebel, get married, and have kids. Hey look, they're talking about women like me. Except I didn't get told to not rely on a man. Instead, I grew up surrounded by people who assumed that women needed to get married and have kids as soon as possible. So what I'm doing with my life, what I want to do with my life, is unusual for where I grew up. It is not the norm. But you know what? She is right in some ways. You know, I am in my 30s with a livable salary, and I am struggling to find any decent man. But you know what? That's not my fault. That's not because men don't want me. That's because I don't want any of the available men, because I'm not lowering my standards for people who suck. I will keep saying it. I'd rather be alone than with the wrong person. And yeah, I am going to share a personal story at this point. If you don't want to listen, that's fine. You can skip to the next chapter in this video. I know some people don't like me sharing my own experiences. That's okay. You can skip it if you want. But if you'd like to hear, then I'll just get emotional for a minute. Kieran dumped me like 4 months ago because apparently, and this sounds like a lie, but ridiculous. I am too ambitious. I am too passionate about life. And he was, in his words, starting to resent my independence. It was like when I always wanted to do stuff, I'd be like, hey, do you want to come with me? And then he'd say no, so I'd go alone anyway. And he started to resent that. And I was like, well, what would you rather I do? I just stay home because you don't want to do something? And yes, he did. Like, if he didn't want to come with me, then he didn't want me to do it. And he was starting to resent the fact that I did it anyway. And looking back, like, that's really, really awful. And yeah, like when he first left me, I was an absolute mess. Now I can look back at that and be like, oh God, like I had a lucky escape. I don't need to be with someone who was holding me back in life. But like at the time, it was shocking. And I've been a wreck these past few months because like I didn't even know he had these issues. He'd been like quietly seething for months because like, you know, I'm more successful and accomplished and independent than him. And he just couldn't really like cope with that. The kind of like inciting incident for it all was this promoter on the street just like went off on me and was really rude, and he started calling me names and being really aggressive, and I wanted to report him to his boss for the way he spoke to me, and Kieran just didn't want that. He wanted me to sit there, like he was completely silent while this man was calling me all these. But tell you the story. We were walking back from a pub quiz, and we walked past this club bar type thing. It was like a bar with a dance floor sort of thing, and there's this promoter with all these leaflets, and he's like quite a big guy, and he was like shoving these leaflets in my face and like getting in front of me, and I was trying to step around him and couldn't because he was like there in front of me, and I just went, can you please just leave us alone? And I said it like that, in that tone. Those were my words. To which he responded by calling me an effing bitch. And I was like, excuse me? And he's like, yeah, you effing bitch, you effing bitch. And I was like, I politely asked you to leave me alone. Like, can you not? And then he said that I wasn't polite because, and I quote in his words, I said please in the wrong way. And I was like, how do you say please in the wrong way? I just said please. And he was like, oh, you effing bitch, you said it wrong. And he started following me, and he was being really aggressive, and he was like shouting at me and swearing at me. And I was petrified. I started crying. I was a mess. I was like, just please leave me alone. Please leave me alone. It's like, you're saying please wrong. And I just didn't know what to do. And I was really, really scared. And throughout it all, Kieran was just completely silent. And he didn't say anything. He didn't do anything. He just let this man like aggressively scream at me in the street and follow me. And I was petrified. And when we'd finally like got away from him, I was like shaking and crying, and Kieran was like, oh, I have work tomorrow, like, ugh. And I'm like, I am literally like terrified right now, and all you care about is not being home in time to get like a full 8 hours sleep. And he couldn't care less. And I was like, I need to like email his bosses and tell them what happened, because if he's that aggressive to a woman who's walking with a man, then how is he going to be to women walking on their own? Like, I think he's a danger to women. So I was like, okay, as we're walking, I'm gonna find the emails, like the email address on my phone. And Kieran was mad at me for doing that, and he thought I should have just like not done anything, not reported him. He didn't want me kicking up a fuss. He didn't want like any of that. So he left me like on the street outside Tesco, basically, and went home alone. And didn't like walk me the rest of the way home or anything, because he was annoyed and he just cared about, like, you know, being home before 10:30 for bed. So I cried the rest of the way home and emailed his bosses, and I don't think anything that came of it, but I feel good for having reported it. Sorry, my recording just stopped. Yeah, I came home and I had like a big cry to Elise on the phone, and she now like absolutely hates Kieran, like really hates him. She was so mad at him, and she was mad that he didn't stand up for me. She was mad that like he just stood by while this man like called me names and swore at me and got aggressive, and you know, he just let a man harass me on the street. And then the next day, Kieran came over and said that like he just thinks I'm too passionate about things, and he'd rather be with someone who just like stays silent and basically just like takes the abuse and doesn't kick up a fuss and doesn't report him to our bosses and stuff like that. And I was like, but I can't do that. Like, I'm not letting aggressive men be aggressive. He deserved to be reported, and I'm not sorry for that. And the fact that he upset me, like, what do you want me to do? Just like pretend it didn't upset me? And he's like, no, it's just like, you know, I don't want it. And I was like, well, this is a reality of being around women. Women get harassed. Women are upset by harassment. Women are angry about harassment. Like, I can't stop men harassing me. So, like, your choice is either, like, don't be around women or learn to deal with it. And he decided that he just didn't want to be around women. And that's like when it all came spilling out about how he was like resenting my independence, and like, and how like he thinks I'm like too ambitious and I want to do all this stuff, and he just wants to like sit at home and like stagnate, and he doesn't really care about furthering his career, and he doesn't want any of this stuff, and he doesn't really want to do anything or go anywhere, but he was resenting me for doing it alone. And it's like, it felt like he was fine with me being more successful when it came to me spending like hundreds of pounds on taking him on fancy holidays and out for fancy meals. But then, like, when it meant, you know, me actually saying, hey, please don't call me a bitch to someone, he's like, no, that's too far. Like, when he has to deal with the realities of what it's like to be a woman, he's like, no, I don't want that. I don't know, it was complicated, it was weird, but my point is, it messed me up for months. It, like, made me reevaluate my entire worldview. I felt like everything I'd ever thought and believed in and felt was just, like, suddenly on its head. And I had, like, all these commenters, like, when I'd be upset about something, they'd be like, oh, I don't know why you're so sensitive about this. Oh, why are you defensive? Why are you sensitive? And I'm like, because what you don't realize is, like, my entire ideology has just been challenged, and, like, I don't know who I am anymore. It's like I'd built up so much self-esteem on this idea that, like, I finally like who I am, I'm finally emotionally stable, I'm finally happy, I'm finally successful, and hey look, here's a man who isn't intimidated by that and loves me for it anyway. And then all of a sudden he's like, oh, actually I am intimidated by that, it's too much, I don't love you. And I was like, oh. And it made me feel like there was something inherently wrong with me. And then I was freaking out because I was like, well, I've been telling all these women online for years that, like, yeah, they can find someone who's going to love them for who they are, even when they're strong and independent and confident and successful. What if I was wrong? Because if I can't find it, what if they can't find it? And then I was panicking because I was like, what if I've let down all these, like, tens of thousands of women and I've been giving them the wrong information and I've hurt them? And I was freaking out about that. And I just felt like whatever I did wasn't good enough because there was something inherently wrong with me. I'm inherently unlovable. And somehow now I'm passing on misinformation to other women, and I was freaking out. And that's why I've been a mess these last few months. And I've had to come on camera and plaster this smile on my face and pretend that everything's okay and everything's happy, and I still believe all this stuff, when in reality I'm like questioning every single thing I've ever said and done and who I am and everything I believe. So I feel like I owe you guys an apology because I don't feel like my work's been good enough recently. I don't feel like I've been good enough. I've been incredibly sensitive about everything because I don't really know who I am anymore and what I think or believe or anything. And I've just been an absolute wreck. And I've been so worried that I've been like giving you guys misinformation. But then, like, at the same time, I'm also thinking, well, what am I supposed to do? Like, I don't want some stupid, silly little intimidated boy in my life if the price of that is that I have to just accept harassment from strangers without question, give up my hobbies, and stop being successful at work. That's not worth it for any boy. And I say boy because I don't think of him as a man anymore. I'd rather keep my independence and be alone and fight for my safety and have fun experiences when I want to, rather than lose it all to keep a man happy who can't even love me as I am, you know? It's not worth it, and he's the one losing out, not me. I might have been miserable these last few months, but he's the one who's going to be miserable long term. And I'm starting to realize that even though I've been like questioning everything, I don't think I was the one in the wrong. I do think I still stand by everything I said about how you shouldn't have to give up who you are for a man. And I do think there will be men out there who will love you for your independence and your success and all of that stuff. It's just I put my faith in the wrong one, you know? That said, to bring it all back to the point about how what was the original point? Women in their 30s with a livable salary but lower chances of finding a good man. Oh my god, this is what I want to tell you. I have tried dating since, and it has been miserable. Oh my god. One man was absolutely lovely and wonderful, and I really, really liked him, and I just felt like such great friendship with him, but that was it. And it was really hard to see him romantically, and I was quite upset with myself because, like, yeah, I mean, like, if it's not there, it's not there. But he was so nice, and he was wonderful. But then I was like, well, I'm a mess. Another man, we just had one date, and he was so kind, he was really sweet, and he was funny, and I really liked him. And then he dropped the whole, oh, actually, I definitely want kids in the future bomb, and I just started sobbing uncontrollably in the bar we were at, like full-on mascara running down my face. It was so embarrassing. Another man, and this is where it gets horrible, was a raging misogynist who kept saying things like how I was not like the other girls, and then he told me that I have terrible taste in music and I need to start going to raves. And I was like, no, thank you, absolutely not. He was also a terrible, terrible cook. He tried to make me a carbonara, and he put cream in it, and the bacon was undercooked, and I couldn't stomach any of it. Oh, I felt so bad. I tried to eat it. I was like, this is great. No. How can you be like a 35-year-old man and not know how to cook a basic meal? Anyway, honestly, the meal was the least of his problems. Oh god, the last person I went on a date with was the worst, and I feel quite shaken up by it. He was another raging misogynist who started off the date by calling his stepsisters slags repeatedly. Quote from him, they're all slugs. And at first I was like, okay, maybe he's just trying to be edgy because he's nervous. And I like laughed it off. And I'm like, yeah. No, it kept going on. And then he kept trying to like repeatedly push my boundaries. He told me that every person I've ever dated has probably cheated on me, and that's just the norm, and that I should get used to it and accept him cheating on me because that's what he was planning on doing. And he was already talking to 5 or 6 other women. And that it would be impossible for me to find anyone who didn't cheat on me, and that if I wanted a non-cheater in my life, then my standards were too high. He also berated me for being the one to ask him out, because apparently that's just not what girls do. I may or may not have thrown my wine in his face and walked out. I've never done anything like that before. I'll hopefully never do it again since. I felt quite bad about it afterwards, but I was just so shaken up, and I was like, I'm not having a man be this manipulative and disrespectful and rude, and I was freaking out. But the thing is, right, I was so shaken up on the way home, and I was petrified about what he was gonna do, so I was like speed walking home with my friend Joe on the phone, and I was like, please stay with me. He did. He was amazing. Elise was also amazing. She was proud of me. She was like, do it again. I'm like, no. You know what she's like, though. But oh god, but I told my friend JD about it, and he was like, hey, but the good thing is, at least now he's learnt a lesson to not be that manipulative towards women, to hopefully like not be that misogynistic. And I was like, yeah, I was like, you're a good man. You're a really good man. And it's really nice that you're thinking so wishfully. And I was like, but the reality is, he's probably not going to have learnt a lesson from that. The reality is, he's probably still a raging misogynist, and all he's going to do now is go out there and use this as a story of like, ooh, one time there was this crazy woman I went on a date with, and then he's going to use the story as another way to manipulate more women. Because Johnny used to do it. Johnny used to talk about his crazy exes all the time, and the crazy ex did this, the crazy... And then if I ever express, like, upset at him or anything like that, he's like, oh, you're just like the other crazy women. And I have a feeling that this guy is going to do the same with other women he's dating. He'll be like, ooh, let me tell you about this crazy woman. And then if they express discomfort at him cheating or pushing boundaries or being manipulative, then he'll be like, oh, you're just another crazy woman. And my one regret is that I might have given him fuel to manipulate more women. That's what I'm upset about. And obviously the way he treated me and wasting my time. Oh my god. The point is, dating has not been fun. It has been so hard, so difficult that I've cried after more dates than I've not. It's just not going very well. So yes, at this point in my life, in my 30s, it is very hard to find a decent man. But you know what, it was also hard to find one in my 20s, and I'm sure it will be in my 40s. The problem isn't with me being 30. The problem is that I'm at a stage in my life where I actually have self-respect, self-assurance. I know my boundaries and I'm not afraid to enforce them. And men aren't used to dealing with that, so they're still trying to be manipulative and crappy. Some of them, it's not their fault. Like, I mean, I'm not saying everyone's like that. Without naming names, the nice one, the really nice one who wanted kids, like, he wasn't a bad guy at all. Not at all. We just had different values and different goals long term. That's it. The other really nice guy that I really liked in just the friend way, like, again, not a bad man. We just had different values. That's all. But the others, like, oh my god, the guy with the wine, the other thing, he's like a guy in his mid-30s, and he's trying to justify to me why he's still dating 19 and 21-year-olds. So I was like, can you not? Like, oh. Anyway, where was I even going with this? Yes, the reason why I feel like it's so hard at this age is because I'm not willing to settle anymore, and I'm not willing to take any crap from men. So does that make it harder to date? Yes. But does that mean it's my fault and that I should have settled for someone earlier, or I should settle for someone now? No! Because I did settle when I was younger, I absolutely did, and it just made me miserable. It ended up with me being cheated on and lied to and physically assaulted repeatedly. Like, that's not a good thing. It's not my age that's the problem, it's the quality of men. Like, oh god. Like, and that's not to say I haven't made mistakes in dating and relationships. I absolutely have. Yes, I have. I admit that. When I was younger, I was definitely insecure about things and, like, didn't have any self-assurance, and I let men treat me badly, and I made mistakes, and I probably treated some people badly as well. I absolutely did, and obviously regret that completely. But, like, with Kieran, that's the first relationship that I haven't messed up. I didn't do anything wrong. And that's why it hurt more that he didn't want me. Because it meant, in my eyes at the time, I was like, that's just something inherently wrong with me. But now I'm realizing, like, the problem wasn't with me. It was with him not being secure enough to deal with a strong woman. And that's not my problem. What this article here is doing is telling women, date when you're younger and less experienced, because you're more likely to settle for anyone who comes along. And that is terrible, terrible advice. And I know I've been all up in the air and unsure and, like, thinking, like, oh, am I wrong, like, these last few months? But I've finally come to the conclusion that no, I'm not wrong. Women should never have to settle and lower their standards. Like, well, men shouldn't either, but you know what I mean? I just feel like women generally are. I'm not going to settle for some cheating, negging misogynist when I'd be happier alone. And I don't think anyone else should either. It's that simple. Besides, in this article, they're missing the huge point that, like, not every woman or person wants marriage and a kid and all that sort of thing. But anyway, let's get back to the article. I'm just going to take Kyra out quickly, but then I'll be back to read more to you. Hey everyone, just voiceover me here. I had to take a break the other day, and then I've just been struggling to get back on camera. I've been struggling with that a lot lately, which is why there's been less content. I am really struggling with just being on camera and being seen, and then I beat myself up about it because I don't know. I feel like I need to make the best videos possible, but then I'm like, well, if I'm not in the right headspace to be on camera, then I can't do that. And I think I've been letting perfect be the enemy of good. And I think sometimes I just need to make something, even if that means just doing voiceover stuff. I mean, there's so many channels out there that are just voiceover, and they're fantastic content. So, I don't know, it just, I'm gonna give this a go as just voiceover and see how it goes, if that's okay. Thank you for listening to me and putting up with my mess. Like I say, I'm just not really in a good place right now, and I'm struggling with everything, and I just don't feel good enough. So I think I just need to give things a go. I don't know. Okay, where were we with this magazine? Where were we? Okay, yes, how to be countercultural. There we go. Right. Point 2 in being countercultural, aka being a conservative punk, if you will, is to learn to think for yourself. Apparently, when we think of what a counterculture does best, we have to acknowledge the fearlessness and freedom with which people express themselves. To be truly countercultural, you must be willing to think independently from the herd and honour your own ability to discern what truth is. This means developing a strong sense of self-confidence, not being afraid of people disagreeing with you publicly, and maybe, most importantly, being curious. Which is kind of hilarious, considering that when a woman does think for themselves, but comes to a different conclusion to this author, they're like, no, don't think like that, stop it. 3 is nurture your overall health, including your femininity. I don't think they're the same thing, but okay. Pop feminism encourages women to embrace only their masculine qualities and be a boss girl and ditch the apparently outdated characteristics of femininity. Again, just not true, but okay. Men, conversely, are advised to stay away from being too masculine and instead get in touch with their feminine emotional side. Can we please stop saying that emotions are feminine? They're not. Everyone has emotions. It is good to be aware of them. The feminist narrative assumes that femininity and masculinity are not biological realities that emerge due to our biochemistry, but are social constructs that are inherently harmful and unnatural to us. No, we can call something a social construct and be aware of that without saying it's inherently harmful. No one's saying that. Oh, for God's sake. The rebellious women today are not burning their bras or getting face tattoos, they're actually opting for developing their feminine qualities, such as creating their own sense of timeless personal style and beauty, homemaking motherhood, restaurant quality cooking at home, speaking with grace, and carrying themselves with poise and elegance. Like, oh my god, can we please stop pretending that you can't be both assertive, self-assured, and successful while still being feminine? You absolutely can be all of them. This is just nonsense to get women to sit down, shut up, and keep us trapped at home. And again, I will say it, if you're a woman saying this stuff, stop it. If you don't believe in feminism, then don't use the benefits of feminism to spread this nonsense. Go be quiet at home. Yeah? And these authors, have they thought that maybe some women don't want to be homemakers and mothers? They aren't skills that I want. It's not rebellious to do something you hate just because a magazine tells you you should. And besides, who even wants to be rebellious? I don't. I'm not a 14-year-old girl anymore. I just want to be happy and content in life, and being forced to birth babies from a scummy misogynist is not how I find happiness. That's not, like, if that's what being rebellious is, then I don't want to be rebellious, you know? Don't simply learn how to be feminine, but how to do things femininely. Mate, as a woman, everything I do is feminine. I don't need to learn it. It's just part of me. They want to say that being, like, feminine is inherent to all of us, but only their definition of what being feminine is, and yet they still say we have to learn how to do it. Shut up. Oh, I can smash the patriarchy femininely. I can be strong and independent femininely. I can be child-free by choice femininely. I can build my own furniture femininely. There. Easy. Now, the other interesting thing to note is that this article was posted on the 5th of November. So just to clarify, on the 5th of November, woke people had apparently won. Conservatives are in the minority now, and they are the ones who are being countercultural and fighting back against this terrible oppression from the woke. They are going against the norm. Don't worry though, it was a short fight. By the 8th of November, they'd won and had apparently finally killed the woke era, according to this story. Now you might be wondering, wait, I don't understand. Are the conservatives winning or losing? Are they the oppressed minority fighting big culture, or are they the anti-woke legends who have won everything and are back in charge? The answer is both, or neither. or just one or the other, depending on what victim stance they want to take at the time. Or, I don't know, perhaps this editor is just accepting whatever ridiculous submissions she gets, regardless of if they're on the same page or not. No consistency. Now, this article is long and boring, so we're going to skip it, but basically it's just like, these damn woke people always wanting to help the underdog. Brah, let's talk about how great Trump is instead, which is a theme we'll be touching on later on. There is just one part of it, though, that I want to mention to point out the raging hypocrisy. They say this about people on the left wanting safe spaces. They say, now we see the push for safe spaces was never really about protection. It was about control. It was about silencing dissent, erasing nuance, and forcing society into compliance with a narrow, ever-changing set of rules that left no room for individuality, freedom, or even common sense. So you admit it. When you try and exclude trans women from women's spaces, it's not about protection. It's about control. At least you're finally being honest. You're not protecting women, you're being exclusionary. There's other examples like this too. They say employees were sent to cringe mandatory training sessions where they were told to check their privilege and confront their unconscious biases. Hiring practices shifted from seeking the most qualified candidates to fulfilling diversity quotas. In some cases, this led to highly skilled individuals being overlooked simply because they didn't check the right demographic boxes. The result? Blah blah blah. Workforce is bad. Blah. So you admit it. When you exclude people based on their race, sexuality, and other identity markers, you end up overlooking excellent employees. It's crazy how you can't admit that was happening before when the victims were women, black people, queer people. However, when straight, white, cis men might be at risk, then it's worth pointing out, yeah? Ridiculous. Ugh. Okay, our next section I am titling Promoting Awful Men, and in this section I'm going to be briefly looking at all of their articles promoting, you guessed it, awful men. I'm going to try and be quick with this section because I thoroughly despise all of these people and I do not have the mental capacity to deal with their crap right now. So let's start with, and it pains me to say this, the least offensive one, Jordan Peterson. I know, if he's the least offensive, how bad does it get? This article is called Can Women Learn Anything from Jordan Peterson? Oof. You guys know I'm not a fan of Jordan Peterson, and the only person more insufferable than him is one of his fans. The renowned Canadian professor and clinical psychologist has returned at long last. Oh god, no, please stop him. After a lengthy hiatus due to ill health, Peterson is slowly convalescing, returning to form with pithy cultural commentary on Twitter. Appearances in his daughter that is a horrible spelling of Michaela, sorry to any Michaelas spelt like that. His daughter Michaela's podcast and the promotion of his new book, Beyond Order, 12 More Rules for Life. Many have long awaited the solace of Peterson's return in a time of such cultural unease, welcoming his calm voice of reason to strip away the veneer of regressive intersectional identity politics. For others, it's caused literal tears. Also, I'm sorry, calm voice of reason where? Are we even listening to the same man? Surely not. For those of us who applaud his return, Peterson is instead a Jungian analyst, a connoisseur of Nietzsche, an insightful biblical interpreter, and a beacon of light for those blindly searching for meaning in their lives. I'm sorry. Ultimately dedicated to the ascendancy and triumph of the individual. I fall into that camp. Wow. When I first heard Peterson speak as part of his online biblical series, it was like listening to someone decipher a foreign language, speaking to me in a native tongue I never realised I knew, and unlatching another world. All misconceptions I had of him hastily fell apart. Yeah, the rest of us just know he's a pseudo-intellectual for other idiots who don't know how to think or fact-check for themselves. That's all. Like, I have no patience for this man anymore. Not at all. He did a famous interview with Channel 4's Cathy Newman. She accusively asked him, "What's in it for the women, though?" "Well, what sort of partner do you want?" answers Peterson. "Do you want an overgrown child, or do you want someone to contend with that's going to help you and that you can rely on?" So you're saying, Newman responds, that women have some sort of duty to help fix the crisis of masculinity. Personally, I think women do have some sort of responsibility to help the men in their lives who feel totally lost and hungry for purpose. Sorry, but no, we don't. We absolutely do not. No more than we have a general responsibility to help and be kind to other human beings. Like, that's all. But I'm no one's mother. It's not my responsibility as a woman to fix a man or men just because they're a mess. You know, I recently got into like a bit of a discussion on Reddit where a man was like, "Oh, I'm such a mess. Here are all my flaws. Here's a list of why I'm a useless man-child who can barely take care of himself. Oh, woe is me. Why won't any woman date me?" And when I pointed out the obvious to him, he goes in response, but isn't the point of a relationship to grow together? I don't get why a woman won't help me. And I was like, that's the point. Couples in a healthy relationship should grow together, not have one person essentially parenting the other. Sure, you want a woman to essentially raise you and look after you like a parent, but what are you going to give back to her? Absolutely nothing. If you can't do basic stuff for yourself, like cook your own meals, keep your home clean, pay your bills on time, organise your own schedule, you have absolutely no right to ask a woman to do it for you. Like, I'm not going to date someone I have to parent, simple as that, and I don't think other women should either. Why should I have to teach a man how to have purpose in life? I'm not his mother. I'm not his parent. I'll happily support someone who knows what they want and help them go after it, but I'm not going to hold someone's hand and do everything for them when they refuse to help themselves. Like, I've been there before, I'm not doing it again, and I would encourage other women to not do it either. Date adult men, not children in adult bodies, you know? In modern culture, it's often implied that women are now morally superior to men. Where? Come on. That we're the mature and faultless sex besieged by misogyny and toxic male attitudes. We don't need any fixing, and therefore lectures on personal responsibility, accepting accountability, and lifting the onus from others could never be useful or attractive to women. Literally no one says this. No one. There are, however, studies which show that women do better in education and are generally happy when we're on our own, so that's interesting. But no one is saying this. Ugh. Women also have a duty to fix themselves, just as men do. Yeah, that's fine. We face problems that are undoubtedly exacerbated by our own bad habits and unhealthy behaviours, and we, like every human on Earth, could always benefit from working on our flaws. Absolutely, that is true of every adult, I'll give you that. Oh, there it is. As a 21-year-old woman, here are just a few lessons I've learned from Dr. Jordan Peterson. That explains so much. Oh, bless her. Come back in 10 years and let me see your regret, please. Bless her. See, she's naive. Jordan Peterson preys on the naivety of young, vulnerable people like this. He just does. Like, we can't blame her that much because he does target the vulnerable, the insecure, the people who need help and don't know any better. And he convinces them that he's smart and he's got all the answers, and they don't realize what an idiot he is. Yeah, and then basically the rest of the article is her just quoting bits of Jordan Peterson. It's like, oh, you know, it means deciding to voluntarily transform the chaos of a potential into the realities of a habit. Like, he uses so many words to not say much at all. It just, oh, God's sake. The author then goes on to say, but women today are told not to change for anyone. We're to be treated like queens, worshipped no matter what we give in return. That's not true. Women's magazines triumphantly claimed why you shouldn't change yourself. You should change the person you're with. I don't think that's true. Unless it means, like, change which person you're with, not change them, you know? Featuring advice such as, you do not need a smaller crown, you need a man with bigger hands. Yeah, true. Do whatever makes you happy, you're perfect the way you are. Every girl has heard it, but what if sometimes it's our own habits and behaviour that are making us miserable? And what if sometimes it's misogynists like you that are making us miserable? Have you thought of that? True self-empowerment is taking your suffering into your own hands and out of the grip of others. Yeah, I'm sorry, but this to me just says she's never really lived in the real... I'm sorry, but this says to me she's just never really lived in the real world. Again, her naivety and ignorance is showing. Women are constantly criticised and told to change. We're constantly told we're not good enough. We're too timid, or we're too loud, too confident, not confident enough, not sexy enough, too sexy, too independent, too clingy. When we're harassed or abused or assaulted, it's always our fault. We led them on, we were in the wrong place, we wore the wrong thing. There's no winning being a woman. The small steps that people are taking now to say, hang on, no, this isn't actually your fault. You didn't do anything wrong. They are good things. They are good steps forward, but they're still small steps forward. It's still not actually the norm. Women still get blamed. In other words, it's not just men who need to look inwards and start burning off their deadwood, the parts of themselves that have rotted and darkened, but women too. Rather than just blame everything negative in our lives on something external, e.g. societal pressure, evil men, microaggressions, unconscious bias, patriarchy, it's more helpful to start taking responsibility for the things we can control. That's surely true self-empowerment, taking our suffering into our own hands and out of the grip of others. Yeah, this is just what being an adult is. But we can take personal responsibility and still acknowledge that there are systemic and societal pressures putting us at a disadvantage, and that sometimes other people are needed to help fix things, or were the ones who have caused issues. Like, imagine if a person got hit by a car, right, and the hospitals were like, well, we could treat them, but it might be more helpful for them to start taking some personal responsibility. maybe they should think about why they were crossing the street in the first place. Why don't they have the individual medical skills to fix their own broken bones? Pah, these injured people always claiming they're the victims. Maybe they should be a bit more self-empowered and take their suffering into their own hands, yeah? Don't expect me to fix your broken bones just because it's my job. No, do it yourself. Professional victim. That's what conservatives sound like. Apparently another thing we can learn from Jordan Peterson is to live is to suffer. Oh god, I hate this. Facing up to your responsibilities becomes far easier once you realise that everyone suffers. As Nietzsche said, to live is to suffer, to survive is to find some meaning in the suffering. Life is very difficult and we all die, Peterson bluntly puts it. Pick up your damn suffering and bear it and try to be a good person so you don't make it worse. There's a never-ending list of reasons to be resentful about your existence, Peterson argues. Everyone you know will die someday, including you, and until that time your life will no doubt be riddled with unfairness, inequality, and seemingly worthless suffering. Complaining about everything will only make things infinitely worse. This is just terrible advice. This exists to do nothing but keep those who are oppressed in their place. Like, maybe, instead of suffering, you could try and reduce your personal suffering and the suffering of others around you. Life doesn't have to be riddled with unfairness and inequality. These are things we can do something about. Like, imagine telling people they should just sit there and suffer because, like, you know, reasons and stuff. Well, everyone does it, so don't try and make it better for anyone. That's horrible. I mean, yeah, teach people that difficult situations and suffering is inevitable to some extent, but only in the sense that it's something that will happen, but it's something you can overcome. And when you see inequality and suffering, you should fight against it and help others through it, right? Don't tell people to suffer in silence. That is just cruel. Absolutely cruel. The author then says, of course misogyny and prejudice still exist, but if women are told that these oppressive forces are everywhere and are encouraged to start redefining words to justify their powerlessness, we will always feel like victims. This is just not true. We can overcome inequality by identifying it in the first place. By acknowledging patriarchy and misogyny and prejudice, we're not just justifying powerlessness, but showing people where and what to fight back against. Again, I'm sorry, this all just screams of naivety. The next article has one of the most laughable headlines on this entire website, and this is one that I've been showing to so many of my friends, and they genuinely think it's a joke. Some of them thought I made this up just to, like, mess with them, and I'm like, nope, this is real, this was published. Donald Trump, Elon Musk, and the golden era of masculinity. Look, I know I say people can express masculinity in a range of ways, and they absolutely can. But nothing about these two self-absorbed, idiotic, dangerous, ego-driven little boys is even close to masculine. Not even a little bit. How is this not satire? How is it not? Come on. The last decade has tested anyone who values truth, beauty, and freedom. Under Trump's first administration, things improved. But the left's hysteria reached new levels of derangement and desperation. From George Floyd-fueled violence in our cities to devastating mandates that destroy countless lives, the ugly spirit of American leftism has revealed itself, and millions finally see what's behind the mask. After years of guilt-driven policies and endless moral scolding, last night the majority voted for something new, a return to strength with no apologies. Okay, but, like, they must have been living in a parallel universe to the rest of us, right? That's the only explanation for someone writing this. And sorry, but George Floyd fueled like, what the hell? George Floyd did not fuel violence. His senseless, cruel death at the hands of a man who was just one small part of a corrupt racist system is what fueled understandable anger and protest. Do you know who did fuel violence, though? Donald Trump, when his supporters attacked the Capitol building under his encouragement. Out of those two men, one is undoubtedly a victim who deserved justice, and the other is a man-child who fuels violence. Like, sorry, but it's true. The success of this new era isn't just about good policies, though. It's about men who embody the warrior spirit, men of action, strength, and decisiveness. Donald Trump and Elon Musk are symbols of this archetype, challenging a culture that's grown tired of conformity and complacency. They brought back the spirit of the happy warrior, laughing in the face of adversity and standing firm against relentless hostility. Like, this has to be a joke. This is the opposite of everything they are. Just look at them, listen to them speak, see how they think. They're not warriors. They're about as far from a warrior as you can get. In regards to Trump, they say his message resonates not because it's about policies alone, it's about strength, self-respect, and a genuine love for the nation. Trump has none of these qualities. Not a single one. He doesn't love America. And I know, you might be like, well, you're English, you're an outsider, you don't say... As an outsider, I'm probably a little more objective than most people. He doesn't love America. All he cares about is himself and his bank account. That is it. That is just a fact. How are the people writing this crap so dense? Genuinely makes me quite angry. From his strategic alliances to his sharp understanding of the issues that resonate with Americans, he's proven time and again that he knows what the country needs. Mate, he ruined your economy the first time round and made America an absolute joke to the rest of the world. Or sorry, is that what you think your country needs? Because if so, you're as deluded as he is. Musk, on the other hand, is a relentless innovator and the mastermind behind Tesla, SpaceX, and other groundbreaking ventures. An immigrant who didn't just achieve but redefined the American dream, Musk took on the ultimate risk by acquiring Twitter, now X, for $44 billion, not for profit, but to uphold the principle of free speech. Like, sorry, but no. Musk made his money off exploiting people in emerald mines, tricking people into thinking he was smarter than he was, and releasing substandard products that, honestly, are still a massive risk to people today. He is all talk with nothing to actually show for it. Don't play off this Twitter thing as some heroic attempt to uphold free speech. It was a terrible investment that lost him a crap ton of money, all because he couldn't keep his ego in check, and he still can't. Wild. Wild. Oh. The rise of figures like Trump and Musk signify a powerful shift in American culture, a return to strong, resilient masculinity. This isn't the superficial masculinity that tries to dominate for its own sake. This is the kind that leads with confidence and real sacrifice. Nothing these men do is for anyone's benefit but their own. This has to be a joke. Who wrote this? How was this published? Why is the world not mocking it more? Oh god, no, I need to move on from this. It's absolutely ridiculous. So, if these people are Trump voters, people who are oblivious to how stupid and egotistical someone like Trump is, you know, a man who has sexually assaulted multiple women and girls over the years, if this is what a Trump voter is, then I have little hope for them. However, there's this article that's trying to convince us otherwise, which is titled, What the Left Still Can't or Won't Understand About Trump Voters. Democrats were absolutely decimated in the 2024 election, and they would do well for themselves to step back and reflect on the fact that this red mandate was a response to more than just small disagreements. I mean, again, I'll say, I know I'm English, so I wasn't there, but looking up the actual numbers of votes, there was a 1.5% difference in votes. I wouldn't call that decimated, but maybe that's just because I know what the word actually means. Anyway, the gist of this article is that Trump voters voted for him because they wanted a return to, and I quote, a normal life, by which they mean a life where people are openly racist, discriminate against others, and have a sexual predator in charge. And I'm sorry, but if that's normal, then I will take abnormal any day. The article says, as it turns out, people don't like being called racist because they believe in some kind of basic border law. Sure, but that's not why you're being called racist. You were being called racist because you were being racist. And I don't really care if you don't like that was being pointed out. Simple as that. People began being labelled as homophobes without question just because they might not have wanted their kindergartners... kindergarten... That's a horrible word. Kids in nursery. Sorry, I'm English. They just wanted their kids in nursery... not wanted their kids in nursery being taught sexually explicit curriculum, learning things like the gender unicorn, or because they believe a school should be required to inform parents about their child's desire to change their sexual identity. Show me anywhere where schools like that had a sexually explicit curriculum. And sorry, but I think it's completely normal for kids to be taught something as basic as people with different genders exist. Like, that shouldn't be controversial. You're just teaching them to accept people as they are. Also, again, I'm going to point out, this publication who is so like, ooh, protect the children, they can't possibly know that gay people exist, are the same ones who are like, yes, married couples, get naked in public places, like film drive-in theatres where kids are likely going to be, and have sex in front of them. Like, come on. Then there's a whole anti-choice and pro-forced pregnancy section with just blatant misinformation. Oh yeah, many who may have been more moderate on the issue have realised that abortion isn't synonymous with healthcare. Yes, it is, as no states criminalise or prevent treatment for miscarriages, ectopic pregnancies, or other pregnancy complications that put the life of the mother at risk. Yes, there is, and yes, they do. Or do you want to just ignore all the women who have died because they cannot legally get access to the healthcare they require? On screen now, I'm showing an article of just some of the women and people who have unnecessarily died because of the restrictions in abortion law. And even if you're getting an abortion for another reason, other than, ectopic pregnancies, all this sort of thing, it is still healthcare. It is still reproductive healthcare, and you are still entitled to it. 100%. Among the many, the Democrats have pushed away what are the toxically masculine men who they say have no place in women's lives. The hashtag #MeToo movement said believe all women, which by default means disbelieve all men. That's not true. Yet it is mostly those males considered to be toxic that are loving husbands and devoted fathers. Yeah, that's not true. And again, a very blatant misunderstanding of what we mean by toxic masculinity. And then they just go on to rant about how if people just got married before they were having sex, then we wouldn't need abortions at all, which of course is wrong and ignores many factors. For example, one, only about half of people who have abortions in America are single. A lot are married women or those in long-term relationships. A lot of people who need abortions already have children already and don't want or can't afford or have health complications that means they shouldn't have more. Two, plenty of people have wanted children outside of marriage too. And three, not every married couple wants children at all. While on this topic, let's end this video with a quick look at their have babies or else style of article. This first one is titled, "We need to have more honest conversations about the biological clock." Women in their early 20s tend not to think too much about it, and women in their 30s perceive it as the monster under their bed. We can't ignore it, but we shouldn't fear it either, because ultimately our biological clock is here to serve us. The term biological clock was first coined in the late 1970s in an article in the Washington Post titled "The Clock is Ticking for the Career Woman." Nowadays, the article is considered sexist, and The Guardian even recently referred to this article by pointing out that if a relationship doesn't end in marriage and babies, it said the woman wasted her time, while no one would say the same about a man. Absolutely. Both of these articles point to a hard reality. The biological clock has been politicized. It has been made to fit ideological agendas, and as a consequence, we are all victims of the mixed messages thrown at us. Messages that, even when they make sense, aren't the truth. Well, yeah, it is sexist, because it assumes every woman wants kids, and that should be their priority. I think there's a way to have an open, honest, and genuinely helpful conversation around fertility without shaming women or fear-mongering. And plus today, we don't necessarily have that ticking clock counting down as quickly as before if you still want to use that image. Like, let's normalize talking about things like freezing your eggs, donating eggs to others, using IVF and other fertility treatments, adoption, and plenty of other options. Plus, can we also start talking about fertility in men, please? Because this always seems to be forgotten and ignored and overlooked. Men, I'm sorry, but you do not have as long as you think you do. You are not infinite sperm machines. Sure, you have a longer period to get someone pregnant than women have to get pregnant, but let's not forget that the older you are, the higher the risk is to the health of the baby. Your sperm quality does decline, and that can cause serious health problems or disabilities in the baby. Basically, anyone who wants kids should be serious about their timeline and start thinking early about getting their fertility checked and making long-term preparations if they can or want to. But let's not scare people into rushing into something as massive as parenthood before they're ready. It should only ever be on the timeline that is right for the individual. Of course, the article disagrees, though. Yes, you could freeze your eggs and take your time to have children, but this will inevitably come with less than ideal compromises that many women tend to take too long to honestly consider, since we've been thinking of hypotheticals the whole time. Instead of fighting against your biological clock and settling for inferior alternatives, it's time we befriend the enemy and even make it serve us. But honestly, every single pregnancy comes with risks and complications, and using IVF or freezing your eggs or freezing your sperm or adopting is not inferior, it's just different. You have to figure out what you want, what your personal priorities are, and what risks and complications are worth it to you, if there are any. There's no right or wrong that fits everyone. If you want to prioritize other things earlier in life and utilize technology to help you have a baby later, as long as you've thought it through and been properly informed and planned ahead, there's nothing wrong with that. If you want to have a kid early, as long as you think you can, there's nothing wrong with that. There's also plenty of risks that come with rushing into a pregnancy before you're really ready, or you're with the wrong partner, or you're not financially stable. So you really need to weigh it all up for yourself. Maybe earlier on in life you have health problems that could really be dangerous. You know, it would be dangerous for you to get pregnant with, and you need to get them treated first before you even think of having a baby. Like, earlier isn't always better. It comes down to the individual. Most of our grandmothers had the man secured before they turned 25. Ugh, God, I think of people I knew before 25. God, you wouldn't want to be stuck with them. In contrast, most people getting married under 25 today are told they're too young. Perhaps we've made excuses for delayed maturity, excuses that are a disservice to ourselves. I'm not saying we should all marry under 25, but I will say that we should all date for marriage even if we're under 25. There's strong data suggesting that women's brains are wired for long-term mating instead of short-term relationships and hookups. Like, give me your source, please. Because once again, seeing that there may be a trend in something does not mean it's the same for everyone in that category. Just because you're like, oh, you know, more women than men want this, that doesn't mean all women want this and men don't. Like, you cannot draw those conclusions. Not all women are like that. Not all women want marriage. You can't tell every woman they should want a certain thing. They should be planning for this certain thing just because you want it yourself. Not every woman wants that. All that said, there is a bit of this article that I agree with. We seriously need to factor children into how we date and be aware if the person we're dating wants them to, and in somewhat of a similar timeline. While the relationship may still not work out, and while for whatever reason children may still not be part of the equation, women are still beneficiaries of dating with an awareness of the biological clock. I do agree with them here. I think it's really important to be on the same page about the big things like this, the big core values. I disagree that the author of this article assumes you should all want kids and be on the same timeline about that, but if we're looking at it more broadly and it's just like, be on the same page about whether you want kids and when, like, yeah, I think that's true. Yeah, then there's this whole section about, like, considering our health, which is kind of ridiculous considering they never considered the health of people with unwanted pregnancies, do they? But okay. The whole thing here is that we should not sacrifice our hormonal health for a lifestyle that imitates a man's natural rhythm. And then they go on to say that if our menstrual cycle or any problems with it are affecting the job we want to do, then the problem is with the job, not our cycle, because we're not men and we shouldn't be having jobs. We should just be dealing with our natural cycle, however it is. The author does acknowledge that having health issues like PCOS, for example, make it harder for women in the workplace. But instead of pushing for things like more funding in those areas of healthcare and for businesses to take women's health into account, the author just says that if we have health problems, then we should take a step back from our jobs instead, because reasons. Absolutely ridiculous. And then they end the article by saying, ultimately what this all points to is an unhealthy desire for control over our biological clock. We are playing God, trying to exert how we want our bodies to work instead of understanding how it works and working with it. After years of telling our bodies they're not supposed to, read aloud, to conceive by committing ourselves to birth control, we demand our same bodies create a baby via IVF treatments. Ah yes, because how dare a woman have control over her own body? How dare she? Rah. Okay, we're nearly done, I promise. The very final article I want to look at is about shaming child-free people, because won't someone think of the grandparents? This one is called More People Are Telling the Truth About the Pain of Never Becoming a Grandparent, and it's heartbreaking. I don't know about anyone else, but like my parents do not want any more grandkids, and they have absolutely come around to supporting my desire to never have children. I think it's great. My mum is just like, you have made the right choice, don't do it. Actually, a lot of the older women in my life that I speak to about it, they're like, oh, you're right, don't do it, don't do it. And my cleaner's fantastic. She's like in her 60s, I think, and every time like I say to her like I don't want kids, she's like, oh, you've made the right choice there, love. If I could go back, I wouldn't do it. And I'm like, right. But, I mean, this is all good now, because, like, I've never had that support before, so it's really nice that women are coming around and supporting me now. But, even if they didn't, so what? It's my body. Like, especially with my parents. So what if they want me to have grandkids? It is my body. It's not up to them what I do with my body. Like, why are conservatives always so keen to have everyone but the individual woman have control over her body? Why can men control a woman's body, parents control a woman's body, but the woman can't control her own body? The article says, the article starts with some stuff, blah, blah, and says, after this, the constant drumbeat of climate alarmism, you mean the actual environmental problems we're facing, climate change is real, and we have a generation paralysed by fear or convinced that choosing freedom of a family is the ultimate path to fulfillment. The result? More people are opting out of parenthood altogether, either because they're terrified of the future, aren't able to maintain healthy relationships, or simply see children as a burden to their carefully curated lifestyles. Oh no, what a shame. How terrible. It's almost like having children is hard and we should be able to choose if we want to do it or not, right? In a Times article, the voices of those grappling with this quiet loss are heartbreaking. For many parents, after raising their children and patiently waiting for them to come around to starting families of their own, they're now finding themselves surrounded by friends whose lives are full of playdates with grandchildren. Instead of the joyous chaos of family gatherings, they face silent weekends in homes devoid of laughter they'd always imagined would fill it one day. They find themselves mourning what could have been, the family Christmases that never happened, the birthdays that were never celebrated, and the tiny hands that were never held. So dramatic. Like, okay, I know loneliness in elderly people can be a big issue, and I don't want to downplay that at all. But if you are an older person alone, then you have options. You can spend time with your adult children. You can make some friends. You can get hobbies. You can spend time with your partner if you have one. Like, you shouldn't be forcing another human to risk their life and health to make an entire baby just to fill your time. That's barbaric. And let's not forget the endless online chatter about how children will supposedly ruin your body, wreck your home, drain your income, and obliterate your social life. Maybe because they will. That sounds pretty accurate to me. These narratives, whether explicitly or implicitly, discourage countless people from embracing parenthood. Now many are grappling with the realization of just how much devastation these messages can cause. So would you rather older people had just lied to us about the realities of having kids to trick us into suffering too? Is that what you want? Why are people always so mad about people just making choices for themselves? Do you not think that if kids were as simple and easy and fun as conservatives make out, then more people would in fact be choosing to do it, choosing to have them? No? The pain of never becoming a grandparent is real, and it's time we stop pretending it's not. The pain of never becoming a grandparent is real, and it's time we stop pretending it's not. So, go volunteer to help some kids. Read some stories to them. Help out at food banks. You have options. You don't need to force a human who doesn't want children to go through a very difficult pregnancy and then 18 years of raising a kid just so you can see them on the weekends and have the fun time, you know? But of course, as with anything that dares humanise the experience of others, the internet's less sympathetic voices chimed in as well, as comment sections filled quickly with complaints about how older people are so entitled to expect grandchildren. I'm sorry, you're right. We should only humanise the potential grandparents who agree with you, and not the actual people whose bodies and wombs you're trying to control and use, yeah? We wouldn't want to go humanising women, would we? Silly old us. If there's one thing that the silent grief of those who missed out on parenthood and grandparenthood teaches us, it's that while independence might seem like freedom, true fulfillment lies in the love that brings us together. You know, again, I'll just end with this. If there's one thing that this crappy, horrible year has taught me, it's that sacrificing my independence for conditional love is not worth it. I will take my independence over love any day, if that love comes with the conditions that I have to suppress who I am, you know? And I think that's true here. Like, and besides, if you really love someone, why would you want to force them to give up their independence? That's not what real love is. It's absolutely not. Anyway, I'm done. I'm very tired. I'm gonna end this here. This video's already too long. But thank you for watching. Thank you for listening to me. I'm sorry I've not been doing great lately. I don't know where things are gonna go over this next year. Like I say, I'm struggling to get on camera. I'm struggling to know my own mind and my beliefs and my feelings, and I don't really know who I am. I'm struggling with... I swing back and forth between like, yeah, no, like, I'm fine the way I am, everything is good, and then like to the other end of like, oh god, you're just inherently unlovable and terrible and it's awful. And yeah, it's difficult, so I'm working through some stuff. I'm grappling with it. Thank you with your patience while I'm figuring things out. I'm just not very happy right now. It's just one of these things, and I need to get my confidence back. That's what it is. I've taken a massive whack to it, and I'm struggling. My book was meant to be out by now, but I freaked out a bit. I was just like, nope, absolutely not, and pulled it because it doesn't seem good enough, and changed the cover art entirely. I'm still changing bits and bobs in it. I don't know. Again, I feel like I'm making perfect be the enemy of good, and I don't know. I'm figuring things out. So thank you all for your patience. I'm going to keep trying to like plow through a bit, and we'll just, yeah, see where things go. I don't know, but thank you for watching today. Thank you for bearing with me these past few months. Thank you for listening and probably being lovely, because most of you are. I'm sorry that when I do see the negative stuff, I just really take it to heart. And especially these last few months, I've been really like internalizing it, and it gets to me. And again, that's something else that I've never really learned how to deal with. It's so difficult because like when you get negative comments, I do always internalize them, and I really beat myself up about it. And it makes me upset. It makes me angry. I get mad at myself. Sometimes I get mad at other people about it. Like, and I get defensive, or I'm like, well, fine, I'll do exactly what you want then. And I give into it. And then people are like, well, why are you listening to me? You didn't have to listen to me. I'm like, well, then why did you say it if you didn't want me to listen? And it's just, I don't know how to deal with it. I don't. And that's been something I've been really struggling with recently. So I'm working through that as well. But anyway, yeah, let me know your thoughts on the magazine, please. I don't know, I just bleh. Anyway, I'm gonna go to bed now because it's midnight and I'm tired. But yeah, thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. And hopefully, even if I don't see you again soon, you will hear from me again soon. Yeah, see how things go. Good night.